Hey, what's up guys, Sir Emanon here, and welcome to another video. So this is going to be, as you read it from the title, 40 different Tri-Brigade Lyrilusc combos using the new Lyrilusc support coming out of Synchro. And this is of course going to be some variations on the same essential bread and butter combos, but I did want to make this video as thorough as possible, kind of give you the most options available if you wanted to mess around with various builds, and also kind of just discuss how we can actually apply these concepts in game from a realistic, pragmatic perspective. So of course, there's going to be a lot of content to go over in this video today. So on screen for you guys right now is going to be a bit of a roadmap for the various topics that we're going to be discussing. But if you guys, of course, don't have the time to sit down and watch this entire video all the way through, because I anticipate this is going to be the longest video I've ever uploaded, that's completely understandable. More power to you if you do plan on just watching it all in one sitting. But I will, of course, be leaving timestamps, and the video will be divided into different chapters, so you can refer back to different concepts if you want to just look at this video back on a later date. And finally, I do want to mention that these videos are, of course, extremely time and labor intensive, so I would highly appreciate if you guys, liked the video, as well as shared it around if you found it enjoyable, useful, maybe share it with a friend, and leave a comment down below if you found the video helpful, or maybe if there's things that you found that could be improved a bit, whether it be through the combos themselves or just video production as a whole. Would highly appreciate it. And if there's anything else you'd like to see, feel free to leave a comment on that as well. And the last thing to mention is there will be a deck profile in the description box below, as well as in the card in the top right. However, there will be combos in here that aren't possible if you use that list exactly. The reason for that is that I want to, again, just give the widest breadth of options available if you wanted to play different tech choices if you don't agree with my build. And so I really just wanted to go all the way in terms of just covering literally everything that I could possibly think of, hence the 40 different combos. But I won't waste any of you guys' time. Let's go and get started with these combos without any further ado. Alrighty, so part 1 of this video is going to be entirely focused on what we can accomplish with a simple lone Tri-Brigade Fraktall. And of course, many people are pretty familiar with the straightforward combo that ends on a barrier statue with protection, but what I want to highlight here is what we can do with the follow-up turn. That is, how we can capitalize on stunning our opponent for their one turn, and then simply OTK on the follow-up. And there's a couple of different scenarios I have here, so let's just go ahead and get started. So we're going to begin, of course, with our Tri-Brigade Fraktall's hand effect that's going to send itself to the graveyard to bin a copy of Tri-Brigade Nervall, which will search as a kit. And then we're going to normal summon the kit, and then use her effect to banish 2 Tri-Beasts from graveyard to go and summon out Heartbeat Conductor. From here, we can then link summon into the Simorg, and then go and trigger our kit effect. That's going to go and dump our Rendezvous. And then in the end phase, we can activate the Simorg to go and summon out the barrier statue from our deck. Now, let's say our opponent tries to just go ahead and normal summon a monster that's bigger than the barrier statue to force our Rendezvous. This is completely fine. As long as they don't have any way to interrupt us, we're just kind of going to assume that we're operating in a bit of a vacuum here. We can actually just perform a pretty straightforward OTK. So in their end phase, we can trigger the Simorg again, which will summon out the Warbler Sparrow from our deck, and then we can trigger that effect to go and search for a copy of Tri-Brigade Nervall. And then play will pass back over to us, and we can actually play around a top-decked Valor or Imperm during the entirety of our turn, which is pretty great. So we don't even need any extra cards, no blanks or anything, doesn't matter where our top deck is. We're simply going to proceed to our main phase. So we're going to normal summon the Tri-Brigade Nervall, putting it in the zone that the Simorg points to give it protection from those aforementioned hand traps. And then we're going to banish 2 to summon out the Ancient Warrior's Link monster. From here, we're then going to overlay into a Vitullo Starling, which already has targeting protection thanks to Warbler Sparrow, so zone placement's not important there. What is important, however, is that we activate the Vitullo Starling's on summon effect to actually give our Simorg Link 600 extra attack points. Very important. Next, we're then going to go ahead and activate the search effect, so we're going to detach Nervall and go for our Barrel Canary. And what's cool here with this new support is that it actually has very good synergy with a card like Tri-Brigade Fraktall, because we can grab it off our Nervall here and then dump another Lyrilusc name to enable our Barrel Canary. But before we do that, we're going to activate our Double Dragon Lord's effect. We're going to send away our Vitullo Starling to go and bounce the monster that our opponent has. Now, if they negate our Double Dragon Lords here, we can actually still go for game, which we'll discuss later, but we're going to continue to play around Valor Imperm right here. So we're then going to use our Fraktall's effect to send our Celeste Wagtail from deck to graveyard, and then we're going to activate the Barrel Canary effect in hand, summoning itself as well as the Barrel Canary, and then we're going to trigger the Barrel Canary again in the zone that is protecting it, and we're going to grab ourselves a Bird Call. From here, we're going to overlay into the Vitullo Starling in the same zone, and then use the on-summon effect again, which will boost our Simorg by an additional 600 attack points, bumping it to 36. Next, we're going to go for our Vitullo Starling, which is going to detach the Celeste Wagtail. It's important that you detach this here since we are going to reattach it to our Assembled Nightingale later on. and then that's going to fetch us a copy of Cobalt Sparrow. From here, we can then activate the Lyrilusc bird call, and we're going to grab ourselves a Sapphire Swallow. Now you could elect to go for the additional special summon effect of the bird call to get Cobalt Sparrow out of hand and trigger her effect, since we didn't actually use her this turn. We used her in the end phase of our opponent's turn, but we will actually run ourselves out of zones to actually use the Sapphire Swallow, so we're actually going to just neglect to use that effect. We're then just going to simply Sapphire Swallow here, summoning out the Swallow itself as well as a Cobalt Sparrow, and then trigger her effect. Now if they negate this for whatever reason, it's fine because this is simply a follow-up card. This could be a DD Crow for all it's worth, but we're simply going to overlay these two into an assembled Nightingale. And then on summon, we're going to apply the effect of Sapphire Swallow, which allows us to attach an additional material from grave. So we're going to attach the Recital Starling, and then we're going to go for Celeste Wagtail to attach itself to the assembled as well. We're going to switch our barrier statue to tap position and then go to the battle phase. Now, depending on if they actually stopped our DDL, which is the only thing that they actually could have negated that was impactful to this board with Veiler Imperm specifically, we have a number of different scenarios here. So currently, as we mentioned, the Simorgh is on 3600 attack. The Assembled Nightingale is 800 attack and can attack 4 times. And so if opponent didn't have a response and this monster was bounced back to their hand, we have more than enough damage for game. This should be 9600. However, if they stopped our DDL and they negated it, then its attack boost should also go as well. So we're going to factor that into a calculation here. So if their monster is 1100 attack or less, we can actually just simply attack with all of our monsters in order and then just use everything we have on field for game. Pretty straightforward. But if their monster is greater than 1100 attack, we can actually use the Recital Starling's final effect, where your opponent takes all battle damage involving the Succeed Summon card as well. So we can actually crash our monster into the Recital, so it's important that you put this in attack position, and then we can go for game that way. So let's simulate the example with the Starlight Safer here. So first, we're going to start off by attacking with the Assembled Nightingale. We're going to deal 3200 damage to our opponent. And then we're going to actually activate the effect of the Assembled Nightingale. So we're going to detach and then make it so that our Lyriluscs can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, and then we take no battle damage. Now, there is actually a ruling which I will pin in the comment section below, where even though you don't take battle damage, you still actually do apply the effect of Recital Starling to inflict the same battle damage to your opponent. And it's a corollary with the new agent support that the OCG recently got, so this is a fairly recent ruling. And these cards operate in pretty much the identical fashion. But we're going to go ahead and crash into our opponent's Safer here, so that would deal 1600 damage since the Barrow Canary is boosting this by 200. And then we can attack over the Safer for another 18, and then we can attack for 2100 between these two. So all that math amounts to 8700 damage in this case scenario, and this works for any monster that's above 1100. Otherwise, you can just attack in a normal order, not having to worry about crashing with Recital Starling. So pretty cool. I think that it's a nice way to demonstrate that you can just OTK with this mechanism. But I then thought, well, what happens if your opponent just kind of sets a monster and decides not to really put a monster that you can easily bounce back with the double Dragon Lords? Well, fear not, because we have ways around that as well. So there's actually 2 different ways that you can go about doing this. I think one is a bit more explosive and provides you with more follow-up, whereas the other is just a lot more contained and concise. So we're going to do the same end phase play. We're going to go for the Cobalt Sparrow, and then that's going to search us our Tri-Brigade Nervall. I did this combo, and then I didn't actually redo this one, whereas I did the previous one to actually just play around Veiler Imperm as much as possible, but you can reroute the zones to make it so that we can continue to play around those hand traps optimally, so that is something to kind of consider here. But we're going to do the same play where we normal summon Nervall on our following turn, and then we can go for double Dragon Lords. And then from here, we're going to overlay for our copy of Recital Starling, and then we're going to use the effect on summon to boost our Simorgh. Following that, we're going to go ahead and detach to search for Barrow Canary. Now, off of this Nervall, we're going to search for the Fraktall again, which is the same thing that we did last time. And here we're going to go for an Apollousa, which is a wind monster, so we can make it under the wind barrier statue. So this does leave us a little bit more vulnerable to certain hand traps, but because we can't actually use a DDL to bounce a face down monster, and there's not really a way that we can profitably use this as a trick in the battle phase necessarily, I wanted to kind of remove all the variants, and we could have definitely used Recital to just attack into the monster if it had big enough defense, like for example hand trap, but I figured that probably wasn't the most reliable since monsters can be any amount of defense. So I want to just see what happens if we go through this line. So we're going to go ahead and Fraktall send the Celeste Wagtail, which we did in the previous scenario. Then we can bring it back with the Barrow Canary as well as itself, and then we're going to search for a bird call. And then from here, we're going to overlay for Recital Starling at number 2, And then we're going to boost our Apollousa to make it 3000 attack. Pretty cool. There's scenarios in which you can get Sapphire Swallow, so you can go, the Recital Starting boost Chilling 1, and then the Sapphire Swallow boost, attach Chilling 2 to make this gain like 900 attack, which actually gives Apollousa an extra negation in that scenario, but not going to come up here. Just kind of a cute thing to note. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and on Recital Starling, we're going to detach our Celeste Wagtail to search for Cobalt Sparrow. Then we're going to activate the Bird Call to search for our Sapphire Swallow. And then we're going to summon out the Sparrow, which is something that we couldn't do last time since we didn't have enough zones. But as you can see, we have vacated our zones ever so slightly, so we are pretty good to go there. So on summon, our Cobalt Sparrow gets us a Tri-Brigade Nervall. Realistically, we could put it onto the Simorgh again to put it protection, to give it protection, but I was not as concerned about it here, though if you want to play optimally, you definitely should be doing that. But from here, we're going to go ahead and Sapphire Swallow these two monsters out, and then we're going to overlay everything for an Assemble Nightingale. We're going to activate the effect of the Swallow to go and attach the Recital, and then we're going to go ahead and use the Celeste Wagtail as well. Celestine Wagtail. I actually forgot that I made this combo. You can see some of these combos I made before DB made the change to Celestine Wagtail, but you'll see some of the combos I recorded afterwards, so you can kind of see the time lapse here. But small note aside, we actually have a 1000 attack point Assemble Nightingale that can attack 5 times. So we can simply go ahead and crash just in case we want to inflict more damage before using our other monsters to clear their set monster. And we can go for game. Now, both Simorgh and Apollousa are 3000 attack. So pretty much between these two, whichever monster you choose, that'll be 8000 exactly. And 3000 should be able to clear any normal set monster. And if not, we can, of course, use our Recital Starling to get there with the extra bonus damage. But there's another perhaps other scenario where you just want to go for a simpler line if they set a monster, and I think this one is a bit more elegant, so I'll show this one off. So we're going to go ahead and end phase on their turn, Simorgh again for the Cobalt Sparrow, which will fetch us a Nervall. On our turn, we can also summon the Nervall and go for our DDL as per usual. Then we can overlay for Recital, and from here we're going to deviate slightly. Of course, we are still going to boost our Simorgh on summon, but we're going to then search for any winged beast. Doesn't really matter here. But what is important is that we Nervall search for Chaos instead. Because we're just going to play it very, very safe and very simple. We're going to go for Apollousa, and then we're going to go ahead and activate the Chaos, pitching whichever we search off of the Recital Starling. And then we're just going to banish 4, and then we're going to summon out Shurag, and then Shurag just gets to banish their monster. Pretty simple and straightforward. It's not as flashy, but it certainly gets the job done. And if they Nibiru you prior to the battle phase, you can use Apollousa to negate it. It'll go down to 1600, but this still should be game because the Simorgh again is being boosted and everything else should total up to be, I believe, 8800. So these are the ways you can simply go for game, even if you end on a very tame board as the Barrier Statue with Rendezvous protecting it. If they don't have the out and you are able to resolve Simorgh on your opponent's end phase, you can amount a lot of advantage on your following turn, which I think is something that is pretty cool to note. And I wanted to showcase off the way that those new cards do contribute to that if you want to go down those routes. So that will be concluding part 1, and part 2 will now be going over the very standard basic bread and butter combos. Okay, so welcome to part 2 of the video, and this is what I'm going to describe as sort of the foundational building block combo, or the bread and butter combo of this deck, and that's going to be a hand consisting of Turquoise Warbler and Cobalt Sparrow. Now, there are of course a number of ways to get to these cards, being Bird Call, Fraktall, Tanky, etc., but all those change the dynamic of the combos very, very slightly. I want to show these off specifically first because I think that it's a great basis to sort of learn the deck from in case you're completely new, because it affords you a lot of safety in Cobalt Sparrow's targeting protection. It allows you to play around certain hand traps, which we'll discuss at the very end of the video, and it also allows you to end on one of the higher ceiling boards that this deck can produce. Not necessarily the highest, but it's pretty far up there. So this is going to be what I'd like to call one of these standard lines that you see a lot of people doing. So first up is going to be us special summoning out Turquoise Warbler from hand, since we control no monsters. And then we're going to be activating the effect to summon out the Cobalt Sparrow from hand. From here, Sparrow is going to grab us a search for a copy of Tri-Brigade Nervall. And then we're going to overlay these two into Recital Starling. You could optionally boost your own Recital Starling, but going first is not really necessary, and in case somebody is main decking Ogre for some reason, you probably want to avoid that. So we're going to detach, doesn't really matter at this stage which one, and then grab ourselves a Sapphire Swallow. I should mention that you definitely want to be prioritizing Nervall over the Sapphire Swallow in case you do get stopped or hand trapped in some way, shape, or form, because this independently does a lot more than Sapphire Swallow does, which is something that I covered in my deck profile as well. But this card allows you to go for a lot more flexibility. You can, for example, normal summon it if you can't get access to Sapphire Swallow, and then like go into Farid, which is some combos that we'll get to later. But from here, assuming that everything does resolve fine and dandy, we can go ahead and use our Sapphire Swallow to summon out itself and the Nervall from hand. We can then overlay these two into Recital Starling number 2, and then we can go ahead and detach our Nervall to grab ourselves Celeste Wagtail. From here, we're going to go and activate the Nervall's effect. That's going to go and add Tri-Brigade Kit. And then we're going to go ahead and give ourselves some insurance against hand traps. So we're going to go ahead and make our Utopic Draco future right here. So of course, this isn't before the point that we can get Nibiru, but don't worry, towards the end we'll of course cover how we can mitigate the impact of Nibiru if it gets dropped on us before this point. So here we're going to normal summon our kit, and then we're going to go and banish 2. That's going to summon out Farid from our extra deck. And then we're going to use the Farid to summon out the Celeste Wagtail from our hand. Here we're going to use the effect to search for Bird Call. And if we started with Bird Call, which we'll get to in a bit, you wouldn't go for this line necessarily, but here it's useful because of the fact that we want our Celeste Wagtail in the graveyard since it gives us another material off our Ensemble Robin. Here we can go and link away for our Simorgh, and then we can go and link into Almirage with our kit, and then we can trigger the kit and go for the Rendezvous, and then we can activate the Bird Call, grabbing ourselves our Barrow Canary, and then we can go ahead and activate the Barrow Canary hand effect to bring back the Sapphire Swallow. You definitely want to do it this way because it allows you to attach an extra material engrave, which is pretty important. And then we can go for our Ensemble, and then here we can go and attach our Cobalt Sparrow, and then use the Celeste Wagtail to attach itself as well. This is a tedious thing to do in Dueling Book, so that's why I kind of just did it, or skipped a couple of steps there. Okay, in the end phase, of course, we can trigger our Barrier Statue, or sorry, our Simorgh Link to get our Barrier Statue, and we are pretty good to go right here. So this might seem a bit redundant as an end board as far as ending on both Ensemble Robin when they can't special summon anyways, but for one, it's good if you run into a mirror match, and for another, it's good in case you get your board kind of like negated and then cleared by something like a Forbidden Droplet or like Dark Ruler, because Ensemble Robin actually gives you follow-up that a lot of people forget about, where if it's sent to a grave in your possession by an opponent's card, you can add back a Lyrilusc from your graveyard. So that's typically adding back something like Barrow Canary, which is quite nice, and I think that's pretty valuable to have just in the event that you do get stopped. It also makes it so that your opponent has to commit more to their droplet. Like, they definitely want to be negating at minimum these two if they think they can play around the Utopic Draco future, for example. But that just makes it a little bit harder for your opponent to drop the droplet on you, since that card is pretty popular right now, especially in main decks, and you want ways to force your opponent to actually commit more resources to that. So that's pretty important, and that is going to be the fundamental iteration of this combo. Now here is going to be a bit of an alteration to that previous combo, since, like I mentioned, opening things like Bird Call changes the dynamic of your combo quite substantially, since you don't want to go for your Celeste Wagtail later and then just, add a duplicate copy of this for no reason when you could just simply search up Barrow Canary directly. So that's kind of the things that I'm talking about, where if there's one thing that you can take away from this video that I'd like you to take away from it, besides the combos themselves, it's the fact that Bird Call is not simply a replacement for the name you're trying to search, because the extra body that you can possibly get from special summoning a different Lyrilusc name absolutely matters, and that definitely will come more into play later on, not necessarily in this specific combo, but that's something that I want to definitely highlight and stress. But we're going to go ahead and start things off with a Bird Call. So we're going to grab our Cobalt Sparrow, which is the missing piece. Of course, if we had Sparrow plus Bird Call, we just search Warbler. Pretty simple. We're going to go ahead and special out Warbler, use the effect to special out Sparrow. It's going to start the same way where we grab Nervall here, and then we're going to overlay for Recital. We're going to detach the Cobalt Sparrow to search for our Sapphire Swallow. We're going to activate the Sapphire Swallow here right now, and then we're going to summon our 2 Winged Beasts, and then overlay for Recital number 2, detaching the Nervall, and we're going to directly grab the Barrow Canary this time around, because again, if we grab our Celestine Wagtail, that's not going to do us any favors because we already have the Bird Call used. So we're going to trigger our Nervall right here, and we're going to grab ourselves a Kip. Then we're going to do the usual overlaying into Utopic Draco Future. We're then going to normal summon our kit, and then we're going to go and banish 2. We're then going to go for the Heartbeat Conductor instead, since we do need a Winged Beast, and we're not going to use Farid to special summon out something from hand, because again, we're assuming that we don't have any other cards to work with. We're going to then move into our our Simorgh. I keep calling this Barrier Statue for some reason, but it's pretty much synonymous with the Barrier Statue at this point. But yeah, we can go for our kits to send Rendezvous. And then we're going to go for Barrow Canary, summoning itself as well as the Sapphire Swallow. And then we can go for our Ensemble Robin, and then attach our Cobalt Sparrow from our graveyard. So notably, this ends on 1 less material off the Ensemble Robin, and we don't have Almirage on our board as well. So you can kind of see how the opening of Bird Call diminishes the quality of our end board slightly. And these kinds of things, while might not be necessarily crucial right here if your opponent can't out this, definitely will matter to the sequencing and the sealing of other combos later down the line. So that's very important to stress. This is another iteration of the combo that is pretty radically different from the other two, and that's because we're actually going to be focusing on sending Tri-Brigade Oath from our deck to our graveyard to end on that. And why that's important is that, of course, we want to beat cards like Forbidden Droplet and Dark Ruler no more, which are devastating, evenly matched as well, actually. All those cards are very devastating to our deck, and so in games 2 and 3 especially, we might want to consider playing this, and depending on how popular certain board breakers become in the current format, you may want to actually slide this into the main deck. But from here, we're going to go and start our combo. So we're going to summon out Turquoise Warbler, special out Cobalt Sparrow with its effect. This is all pretty rinse and repeat, if you will. We're going to go for our Recital to go and search for our Sapphire Swallow. We're then going to activate the Sapphire Swallow to summon out both our monsters, and then we're going to overlay for our second Recital. We're going to we're going to detach to search for our Celeste Wagtail, and then we're going to go for Nervall to add Kip. And then we're going to make our Utopia Draco Future as usual. And then we're going to normal summon a Kip, but we're going to do things a bit differently this time around. So we're actually going to banish 4, which might seem a little bit suspect since we're banishing all of our Lyriluscs, but we're actually not going to be ending on Ensemble Robin anyways, so it's fine. We're going to go for our Shurag here, and then we're going to actually use it as a combo piece, which is similar to what things like, the Fabled Cerberil combo does. We actually use this as a sort of an additional extender, if you will. But yeah, we're going to link off into Farid and trigger both our Shurag and our Kit. So we're going to send our Oath, and then we're going to add Chaos from deck to hand. And then from here, we're going to go and activate the Farid to summon out the Celeste Wagtail. The reason why you're not going to pitch it for Chaos right away is that you need the Winged Beast to not only turn on the Oath, but also to go for our Simorgh link. So we're going to Wagtail search our Bird Call. And this is notably, again, different if we open the Bird Call itself. So do keep that in mind if you're going for this combo. This certainly changes, and you probably will need to have another Beast or Tri-Beast in your hand as just pitch fodder for your Chaos. So that is, again, why opening Bird Call is different from just opening the hard combo piece itself. So we're going to go for our Simorgh here. Farid can help you dig for the missing Tri-Beast if you want to end on Ensemble Robin as well, which is important, because this can add Barrow Canary, and if you have a spare Tri-Beast name anyways, you can just pitch that for Chaos instead. Here we're going to just go ahead and instead search for something that we don't mind having in graveyard for later, which Cobalt Sparrow is pretty decent. You can also leave this in deck, depending on how many copies you play, just so you can grab it off your Simorgh. This is really up to you. This could be any Lyrilusc name. We're going to, though, pitch it for our Chaos, and then we're going to use the Chaos effect. That's going to banish 2 for our DDL. And then in the end phase, we're going to activate our Simorgh for our Barrier Statue. So we have Winged Beast, Beast Warrior, and Beast, which turns on our Oath to make it so we can negate a face-up spell or trap that our opponent controls. So that's, again, very good in games 2 and 3. And this is still a pretty sizable board. You don't have the Ensemble Robin, but you have the Ancient Warriors link to protect this from being run over as well, which is pretty good. It's kind of awkward if you don't have things readily available to send, because you want to keep all the types on board for your Oath in case your opponent holds things like the Droplet for later on. But this is still fine. You can always send from hand, worst case scenario, so that's fine too. So that is a alternate way of going about this combo. We can then go into another different route that is not one that I am playing myself, but I think is worth showcasing. So this particular iteration of Warbler plus Sparrow is actually not one that I'm currently playing in my build, but if you wanted to incorporate Berry Balloon plus Revolt interior lists, maybe as a hedge against Dark Ruler plus Droplet or something like that, just to have extra interruptions in the event that you do get stopped, then this is a combo that you should be familiar with, and you do need extra random cards for this one. You're going to need stuff to pitch off your Berry Balloon when it's on field, and you're going to need a card to return to your hand once you search the Revolt itself. So it is pretty resource intensive here, which is one of the reasons I'm not the hugest fan of it, but nonetheless I think it is worth going for if you want to be a bit more Tri-Brigade forward in your build, which is fair enough. So we're going to start things off with Turquoise Warbler. We're going to use her effect and then summon out the Cobalt Sparrow. From here, we're going to do the same things as we've done last time. We're going to search Nervall here, and then we're going to go for a Recital, and then we're going to detach to search for our Sapphire Swallow. We're then going to Sapphire Swallow to summon out our 2 winged beasts from our hand, and then overlay for Recital number 2. We're then going to Recital to search for Wagtail, and then grab Kit off the Nervall. And then we're going to go for the Utopic Draco Future right here. And then we're going to normal summon Kit, and then use the effects kind of similar to 2.1 and 2.2. We're going to go for Farid right here. And then we're going to go and special out the Wagtail from our hand. We're going to go and Wagtail search for a Bird Call. It's okay if we open the Bird Call here, because you could search anything off the second Recital Starling. This doesn't have to be Wagtail specifically. And you'll still have enough cards to pitch for Bear Bloom and then put back for Revolt. But this gives you an extra card. So again, it's not the same if you open Cobalt Sparrow versus opening Bird Call. Very, very different. You could still go for this and just have a second Bird Call, which is fair enough since you don't need to use this anyways, but I thought I would just kind of bring this up. Now we're going to go for our Bear Bloom, which is going to be hard made with our 2 Tri-Brigade monsters, and then we're going to trigger the effect of Kit. We can also trigger Farid as well if we want to. And then we're going to go and Bear Bloom right here. So we're going to pitch 2 cards to summon back the Nervall, which is cool, not only because it's a Tri-Brigade name that we haven't used on field yet, but also because it's a level 1, so we can overlay with it. So that's nice. There's a number of different ways you can do this. So in this example, we're going to go ahead and go for Heartbeat Conductor into Apollousa with these 2 monsters. If you wanted to, you can go for the DDL right here and then go for Apollousa with these 3, and that's fine. It just kind of depends on what you prefer. Also, what I should note is that you're not always going to see Rendezvous and like the Bear Bloom Revolt stuff in the same build. This is just kind of for demonstration's sake, just to see what you can do maximal, like with all these cards in your deck, basically, like the maximum potential. So yeah, if you don't see these cards in the same build, if you don't want to play these cards all in one build because it's too bricky, that's totally fair, but I just wanted to highlight that this is theoretically a possibility. We're going to go for Apollousa here, and then we're going to go for Bear Bloom. That's going to go and search us a Revolt, and then we can put back a card to the bottom of the deck. This is why this Bear Call didn't end up mattering, since you can't go for Barrow Canary and then like activate Canary effect, because again, that conflicts with the Bear Bloom, since you're locked into Tri-Brigades, and then the Barrow Canary locks you into Xyz, so it is mutually exclusive, which is not the greatest. But nonetheless, if you want to end on this kind of board, it's definitely an option too. If you do play the Rendezvous, your ensemble is actually protected right here. And once you detach for Nervall, that's like a follow-up play, although Revolt gets you to that anyways. So right here, you can still make Shrike, which is like one of the things that's noteworthy, because sometimes you run out of space in like other combos. But here it's totally fine, because you can just bring back the hard-made Bear Bloom. Plus 2 of your Tri-Brigades, that's totally okay. So this is another iteration of the combo. Again, not one of my favorites, but it is one that I want to show off for the sake of just making sure that the guide is complete pretty much. So this right here is actually a simulation of a potential OTK scenario, and this is of course completely hypothetical, but if you wanted to go for it using entirely the Lyrilusc engine, you don't even need the Tri-Brigades for this, then this is a pretty good thing to keep in mind. Like maybe you're feeling safe, like you stopped your opponent successfully from comboing. Right here, it's like maybe they summon a connector, you just impermit and they pass, and like hey, you have a cross designator in case they drop a hand trap on you. So maybe you feel safe. You can go for game with Warbler Sparrow right here. You can ignore this Fraktall. It's not going to come up in this equation. So right here, you're going to go ahead and do the standard special out Warbler, special out Sparrow, and then you can go for the Wagtail. So this is a bit different because this is again going to just try and go for as many Xyz monsters as possible, because we are going to go for an Assembled Nightingale / Recital Starling OTK. So we will overlay into a Recital Starling. Recital is actually going to boost our opponent's monster here by 600, and why that's important is that we want to be, again, utilizing the ability to crash these monsters into our opponents. So we're going to go ahead and detach for our Sapphire Swallow off of this Recital Starling, and then we're going to go ahead and activate the Sapphire Swallow's effect. That's going to summon itself and the Wagtail to the field, which will grab us a Bird Call. Again, different if we open the Bird Call, so keep that in mind. You're going to need more extenders there. But we're going to go for the second Recital. We're going to boost our opponent's monster again. So now it's on 2,000 attack, and that's the magic number that you want to get to. So realistically, they need to have an 800 attack point monster or above. And that's because these will be dealing 2,000 damage each, and then the Assembled Nightingale will deal the remaining 4,000. So we're going to search our Nervall here. Really, this could be any name, because we haven't normal summoned yet, so just anything that's normal summonable is fine. This affords us Tri-Brigade follow-up if we need it. We're going to go ahead and search out our Barrow Canary here. And we're going to then normal summon our Nervall. It's important that we actually don't use the effect. We're going to Barrow Canary first, I suppose. It doesn't matter which order you do this in, but it's important that if you normal summon Nervall, you don't actually banish your resources from grave, because you are going to want to have those. Those are going to come in handy. So we're going to go and overlay for Assemble Nightingale, and then we're going to attach the Celeste Wagtail using its own effect. So this is actually on 1,000 attack points right now because Barrow Canary is boosting it by an additional 200. So it's 1,000 that can attack 4 times, and then Connector's on 2,000 right now, so you attack directly 4 times for 4k, and then following that, you can do the interaction that we discussed earlier, where even if you detach and prevent yourself from taking battle damage this turn, you still can apply the effects of Recital Starling to go and deal damage to your opponent. So these will deal the remaining 2k damage each, and that is going to be game right there. So this is a pretty nifty play to be aware of if you're feeling very safe. Maybe like you dropleted your opponent's entire board and have no hand. Maybe you have, again, like Cross-Out Designator for some reason. This is something that is good to have up your sleeve. So that's it for the Warbler Sparrow combos. Next, we're going to move into a pretty similar but slightly higher ceiling and higher combo potential, although maybe a little bit riskier play in the Warbler plus Wagtail. So generally speaking, Warbler plus Wagtail lines are quite similar to Warbler plus Sparrow lines. Just the difference is that you get to access Bird Call earlier, and that's pretty advantageous because you get to make use out of the effect of Bird Call to special summon an extra body from hand. And that makes a big difference in the math of how many monsters you get to summon to your board, and it allows you to go for additional interruptions, which is pretty nice. Now, this line in particular, as you see in the chat right here, is going to actually be exactly the same as the Warbler Sparrow line, because I consider that to be, again, among the safest lines, while still being pretty high ceiling overall. And there's a pretty clear weakness and choke point in the next combo that we're going to cover with these two, but you'll see that this is fairly similar. Now we're going to start things off with Turquoise Warbler. We're going to summon out the Celeste Wagtail here, and then we're going to go for our Bird Call. Notably, if you open Bird Call instead of Wagtail, you're going to be wanting to search the Sparrow instead, just because if you go for Wagtail and you search a duplicate copy of Bird Call, it actually just makes it so your combo can't be finished in the same manner as before, since instead of having 2 monsters after you resolve your first recital, you have a monster plus a dead Bird Call, and that doesn't really get you a whole lot. It gets you somewhere, which we'll get to a bit later, but it's definitely not what we want to be achieving. But yeah, we're going to go for recital number 1. We're going to go for a Tri-Brigade Nervall, and then we're going to activate our Bird Call for our Sapphire Swallow. Now, it seems like a bit of a waste to not actually special our body, which is something that we'll cover next combo, but here is again just kind of the safer line. So we're going to go and special out Sapphire Swallow and the Nervall, and from here it's basically exactly the same as combo 2.1. Instead, we're just going to reverse the order of Wagtail and Sparrow in the combo, but it ends up being the same. So we're going to go ahead and search for Sparrow, and then we're going to add Kit off Nervall, and then we're going to speed things up right here. We're going to go for the Draco Future, normal summon Kit, special out to the Farid by banishing 2, special out Sparrow from the Farid, and then we're going to go and search our Barrow Canary off that, turn these into the Simorgh Link, go for Almirage off the Kit. Kit is going to send us Rendezvous, and then we're going to go for Barrow Canary to bring back the Sapphire Swallow so we can get 4 mats under this Ensemble Robin. So this is, again, exactly the same end board as combo 2.1. I think it is pretty safe to go for, but let's see what happens if you want to maybe extend a bit further at the cost of having a very clear choke point. So this is a combo that results in us actually taking full advantage of Bird Call's ability to get us the initial body, which we mentioned at the beginning of last combo. But as I've been saying this whole time, there is one very clear weakness, which we'll get to pretty shortly here. So we're going to go ahead and summon out Warbler and summon out Wagtail off that, and then we're going to go for our Bird Call. We're going to overlay for our Recital Starling, but here we're going to search for our Cobalt Sparrow, because this is the monster that we want to summon off the Bird Call. And now we're going to activate Bird Call. This is the choke point. If our opponent ashes us right here, we're in big trouble, because sure, we can normal summon our Cobalt Sparrow, but that doesn't actually get us anywhere, right? Because like, now we're relying on other cards in a hand, and it becomes a lot messier because 3-card combos are generally not super reliable, unless if like they require more generic pieces. For example, like a random discard or like a Tri-Beast discard, and this doesn't actually get us to any of the end board that we want to. So if our opponent is smart and ashes us here, we're going to be in big trouble. So definitely be wary of that. If your opponent is smart and catches on to this, then you don't want to be performing this combo. But we're going to go ahead and search for Sapphire Swallow off the Bird Call, and then use the effect to actually summon a different name from our hand. So we're going to summon out the Sparrow that we searched earlier. And this gets us to our Nervall. So you can see the difference of the Bird Call is that we get an extra body on the field once we resolve our Sapphire. And why that's important is that we actually get to keep the Nervall potentially on the board if we want to go down that route, or we'll just have a freer way to access our Simorgh link. So you can kind of see the benefits to this if we manage to actually just go fully unpunished, basically. But yeah, like I said, this is extremely hard to Ash on Bird Call, so be cautious of that. We're going to overlay for our Recital Starling, and then we're going to use the effect. We're going to detach our Barrow Canary. Now, if we get Nibiru, it's pretty much the same situation because we're going to be triggering Nervall anyways, which we'll cover in just a bit, or we'll cover at the end, I believe. But yeah, we're going to go and go for Utopic Draco feature again. And then here, because we have a lot of bodies in our grave that we're not super concerned with, we can just start to banish them. So we're going to go and banish 2 for Nervall. We're going to go for Heartbeat Conductor. Because we don't actually need to waste our Farid since we didn't search anything that's beneficial to special off of it. So we can keep that in our extra deck, no problem. Then we can go for our Simorgh link, and then we can go for Nervall to search us Kip. We still have a normal summon, so we can just go for that. And here we can just banish our 2 monsters that we just sent away to the grave to go for the DDL. We're going to link into our Almirage using the kit, send our Rendezvous, and then we can go on our merry way with Barrow Canary. So because of the way the zone placements line up, you can't actually give the Ensemble Robin targeting protection since you're going to have 2 links. Plus, you want to give the Barrier Statue the targeting protection over this card. And so that's why it's important that you actually banish the Sapphire Swallow and the Turquoise Warbler off your Nervall if you do this play, so that you keep the Cobalt Sparrow in your graveyard to give it the targeting protection that the Simorgh would give it, give by itself, if that makes sense, right? So it's basically, mitigating the fact that this isn't able to protect the Ensemble Robin, but it doesn't need it because it's a strong independent bird. We're going to go ahead and attach our Celeste Wagtail, and then we're going to go to the end phase. We're going to go and just simply summon our Barrier Statue, and there we go. So this is a lot higher ceiling. By a lot, I mean you get an extra DDL on board, which again makes Droplet way more awkward because now they want to Droplet send 3, maybe 4, and that doesn't feel good unless you're playing like super graveyard heavy deck, like maybe Phantom Knights or like a really good Drytron hand. So yeah, again, that's why I mentioned right here, Droplet is considerably harder if it's the only way that they have to break your board. And yeah, also, yeah, if you want to play Link Reba over Almirage, the previous combo is good enough, honestly, because you can't really profitably go for this combo if you don't run Almirage, unless if you really want to just keep the kit on board and then send it away with DDL on their turn. But that's a bit risky because if they Lightning Storm you, then you're kind of in trouble because all your monsters will kind of just get cleared and you don't have a way to protect your Barrier Statue anymore. So that is something to keep in mind. There's all these little things that do add up. But yeah, this is something that I thought I'd show up because I think that a lot of people would probably go for this play, but there's reasons to go for it and there's reasons not to go for it. So definitely keep these in mind when you are both deck building and playing in real game scenarios. So as with the Warbler Sparrow opening, I'm going to showcase actually 2 different ways that you can end on Tri-Brigade Oath in the graveyard, because I do believe that that is a very valid option to consider if you are trying to beat side deck cards or just board breakers overall. So we're going to go ahead and showcase off the safer option, which is basically the play that doesn't lose instantly to Bird Call or Ash on Bird Call. So we're going to go ahead and Warbler into Wagtail. We're going to search our Bird Call. And then we're going to do the play where we search the Nervall first, and then we're going to search Sapphire off Bird Call. And then from here, we're going to simply special out these 2 monsters. And then we're going to overlay for our second Recital Starling, detaching Nervall to add Cobalt Sparrow, and then we're going to add Kit. This looks pretty familiar. We're going to overlay for Utopic Draco Future. We're then going to normal summon our Kit, and then use the effect actually to banish 4. This is, again, reminiscent of the other combo when we went for Oath. We definitely need to access Chaos via the Shiraig, and that's primarily how we're going to do this, so that's kind of just something to think about as far as the way you structure these combos. We're going to link away into Farid, and then we're going to go ahead and use our Omen as well as our kit, so we're going to send Oath and add Chaos. Then from here, we're going to go and Farid, summon out Cobalt Sparrow. We want the extra Winged Beast on the field, again, to make our Simorgh, so that allows us to add pretty much anything that we're willing to pitch off the Chaos, or maybe just a follow-up play, maybe like a Barrow Canary if we had an extra Tri-Beast. Like that would be pretty convenient. But assuming we have nothing, we're just going to link off into our Simorg, go for Keras, pitching the Celeste Wagtail. Then we're going to banish 2 for our DDL. And then we're going to pass on the barrier statue. So again, we got the types that we need. So we are in a pretty good spot. And this is, again, the safer way that just allows you to play a little bit more conservatively, passing the ability to end on the Ensemble Robin as well, in favor of just making sure that your plays go through, which I think is pretty important. But just in case you're in more of a daring today, are we kind of mood, here is the super high ceiling, just completely all in combo. So we're going to go for Warbler into Wagtail. Wagtail grabs us the Bird Call, and then we're going to go and use our first recital for the Cobalt Sparrow. So again, maximizing the use of Bird Call here, we're going to go for Sapphire Swallow, and then something out the Cobalt Sparrow right here. We're going to use these Sparrow effects to search ourselves Nervall. I put it on the far right just to remember that I actually want to overlay with Nervall, which seems a little bit counterintuitive given what we did last time, but I'll kind of explain the reasoning right here. So what we're going to be doing right here is we're going to overlay for the second Recital Starling. We're going to detach, and then we're going to search ourselves our Barrel Canary as well as our kit. Now, if we overlaid with our 2 Lyriluscs and kept Nervall on board, you could do that. It just makes it so that if you have Nervall, you're kind of forced to use the Nervall effect since you won't have this kit in hand yet. And we'll actually just run through this first. So we're going to go ahead and go for Utopia Draco Future. Now, imagine that this kit's not here and this is Nervall instead, right? Because you, again, won't have access to kit. You're going to be using the Nervall instead of the kit to try and banish 4 for Shrike. But what ends up happening is that you're going to link those 2 away for Farid, just so you can get access to kit. And then you're going to be short a bunch of Winged Beasts unless you want to special this out of your hand, which really kind of defeats the point of this combo, because if you don't end on Ensemble Robin, you might as well go for the safer play. There's like not really a benefit to that at that point. But if you go for the play this way, you get to keep the Winged Beast on the field for free and then utilize your Farid to actually get the Keras out of your hand, which is what you want to be doing. So yeah, we're going to activate both our Kit and our Shuraig. We're going to go for Oath and then Keras here. We're going to use Farid to special out to the Keras. Then we're going to be linking off into our Simorg, go for DDL, activate Barrel Canary, and then go for a relatively small Ensemble Robin, but that's fine. And then we're going to go into the end phase for our Barrier Statue. And Oath is still alive, which is great, and we have all of this set up. And Ensemble Robin is a nice follow-up again in case it gets cleared, which is always something that is pretty valuable. So yeah, is this better than just going for the board minus Ensemble Robin and making sure that we beat Ash? Debatable for sure. Kind of just depends on the anatomy of your opponent's deck. Some decks might not be playing Ash, so maybe you don't have to be worrying about that. But these are all very small, minute optimizations to consider, and that is kind of the fun that I have in like making combos. It's not necessarily just like sitting down and thinking of like, oh, what's the best end board that I can produce? It's what's the most efficient end board that I can produce while also playing efficiently and safely around specific hand traps or stops that my opponent might have. So that is going to do it for the Oath plays. We're then going to move into the Revolt line, which again is one that I'm not playing, but is one that I think should be included. So let's hop right in. So what's neat about this particular version of the Bear Bloom plus Revolt combo is that unlike when you open Warbler plus Sparrow, you actually don't need these spare cards to discard. And that's because of the fact that, again, Bird Call gets you the extra body on board, so leaving Nervall lets you activate a Tri-Brigade effect early, and that enables you to just go for your plays much more efficiently, and you don't actually need these spare discards, which is pretty cool. So we'll kind of just showcase that off right here. We're going to go for Turquoise Warbler into our Celeste Wagtail. We're going to grab our search for our Bird Call. We're then going to overlay for our copy of the Recital Starling, and then we're going to search for our Cobalt Sparrow. We're going to use Bird Call to search out the Sapphire Swallow, and then use the secondary effect to special out Sparrow from hand, triggering the Sparrow here to search ourselves the Nervall. Now from here, we're going to go and use the Sapphire Swallow, summoning itself in Nervall to the field, and then overlay for a second Recital Starling, and then we're going to search for any Winged Beast. This could be pretty much anything, since we're not going to be using Barrel Canary anyways, since again, it conflicts with Bear Bloom, so this probably wouldn't be DD Crow, because we're going to be specialing out off of the Farid later, but this is just there signifying that it could be anything that is searchable off the Recital, that is. So we're going to go and overlay for Utopia Draco Future, and then since we have this spare Tri-Brigade on board, we can use it as effective right here. We're going to summon out the Farid, and then we're going to special out the DD Crow, or whichever that we searched off of the Recital. And then we're going to hard make Berry Bloom again using the Nervall Engrave to search out our copy of Kit, which we have not used our normal summon yet, so that's what we're going to expend it on. We're going to normal summon out Kit, and then we're going to banish 2 for our DDL, and then finally we're going to go for Apollousa. So this is what I described in the previous combo involving the Berry Bloom Revolt, but this is a more practical sense of just demonstrating it because you can't overlay Kit plus DD Crow into Ensemble Robin, so it makes a lot of sense to do it like this. We're going to trigger both our Kit and Berry Bloom. We're going to dump the Rendezvous and then go for Revolt. And then we are in a good spot right here. So you can do the same Revolt combo as the Warbler and Sparrow opening if you want to. Either if you did the play where you play around Ash and Burkhall, which is one of the combos that we did previously, where we just search off our Nervall right away instead of searching off Sparrow and then just playing it out exactly the same way as Sparrow plus Warbler. Or you can choose alternatively to use Berry Bloom's effect to actually just bring back level 1, and these cards wouldn't be in your hand at the end of it. I feel like that kind of defeats the point of just advantageously using the Burkhall effect to special, but you can end on an additional interruption, which is not too bad, so it's something to think about if you find that this is not enough interruptions. I find that if you again have to use a Call by the Grave across the designator or something, then it's nice to have these extra cards because you're not going to be able to actually use them in that scenario, but it would just trade for hand trap at that point. But yeah, this is the other way that you can use Tri-Brigade Revolt if you so desire. Okay, so we are now in chapter 4 of the video, and this is going to be covering Fraktall plus Turquoise Warbler. And this is a pretty interesting pair because this ultimately ends up functionally being the same as Warbler plus Sparrow or Warbler plus Wagtail, since this is simply a surrogate name for either of those by sending them to the graveyard. But the addition of an extra Tri-Beast name in your graveyard is pretty interesting because it changes the math very slightly on Tri-Brigade banishes, which does actually add up in the long term. This one extra name can make the difference, so we'll kind of talk about what we mean by that. So we're going to start things off. This is actually going to be the same as the Warbler plus Wagtail combo, but I just want to highlight a small difference at the end of it. So if this is just the same stuff, we're going to go and Warbler into Wagtail. We're just going to speed this up because you should have seen the other combo if you're not familiar with this string by now. But we're going to do the greedy, quote-unquote greedy play where we can lose Ash and Burkhall, but in exchange we get the Sparrow on board alongside of these 2 bodies, so we get the extra name. So we're going to go ahead and overlay for the DD, or for the Draco Future, we're going to go into our Simorg. And you'll notice that actually one of the banishes, instead of being 2 Lyriluscs, was actually the Fraktall that we sent initially. And that leaves an extra Lyrilusc name in Graveyard, which makes us use the Ensemble Robin a lot more profitably. So we're actually going to then banish 2 for the DDL. We're going to go into Almirage, and then we're going to activate the effect of Kit, sending our Rendezvous. And then we're going to Barrel Canary, and we're going to actually go ahead and bring back Sapphire Swallow, because if you recall last time, what we did was we brought back the Sapphire, or the Cobalt Sparrow, and we put it over here, which was fine because it gave us targeting protection, and you can still opt to do that. But what this allows us to do instead is give us 1 more material underneath our Ensemble Robin, which is generally pretty appreciated. And sure, they can target this to out it, but that's not a huge problem. They're investing a resource when they probably still have to deal with everything else on their board anyways, so it's okay. But the main point of this is just to show that opening Fraktall, similar to opening Burkhall, is actually not exactly the same as opening whatever piece that you would have hard drawn otherwise, right? Because again, if that was just a hard drawn Wagtail instead of the Fraktall, you're banishing 1 more Lyrilusc off the initial Nervall, which makes it so you have less space for Ensemble Robin. So it's all these minute things that do add up, and even though this doesn't matter to a lot of people, I kind of want to demonstrate that this can certainly make the difference at times. So we've already established that if you open Fraktall plus Warbler, you can perform basically any of the aforementioned combos in chapters 2 or 3, which is pretty great, but I'm not going to spend too much more time on those and instead focus on some alternative combo lines that either are benefited by having Fraktall or are necessitated by Fraktall. So let's go ahead and jump into the first one. So this one is one that is benefited by Fraktall, but you don't necessarily need it. You can simply hard open the piece, which is going to be Wagtail at this instance. And this is going to be an Oath line that focuses on making Apollousa over Utopic Draco Future. And why this is something I want to show is that a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but some people are choosing to actually cut the Utopic Draco Future package, which is somewhat valid if you think about the purpose of Apollousa versus Utopic Draco feature, since those are primarily used to make sure that you don't get Nibiru'd at a time that is harmful to you, since in either case, whenever you get Nibiru'd before either of these monsters come down, being Apollousa or UDF, you get Tri-Brigade follow-up to actually not only clear the Nibiru, but set up the board anyways, which is good enough. And that's like at the very end of the video. But I want to just highlight the fact that Apollousa is an option if you do not want to go for Utopic Draco feature and you want to use the extra deck spots for something else, which is totally fair. And you can extend this to the entirety of chapters 2 and 3 if you don't like UDF. So keep that in mind. But we're going to go ahead and pretty much perform a similar combo at the start. So we're going to Warbler into Wagtail to search Bird Call, and then we're going to go and search for a Sparrow off the recital. Here we're going to Bird Call, we're going to do the quote-unquote greedy play. I don't like to call it a greedy play because it's not necessarily a greedy one, but it's a riskier one. Maybe I should just call it that instead. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and activate our Cobalt Sparrow on Special Summon to search for our Nervall. And then from here, we're going to actually just go into a Heartbeat Conductor right away. And this is kind of reminiscent of the previous iterations of Tri-Brigade Lyrilusc that used this combo line. Is that with the addition of Bird Call, you actually get an extra body, which is pretty cool because previously you would have like Sapphire Swallow plus Nervall, and you would turn the Swallow plus the Recital into the Heartbeat Conductor, leaving you with just a Nervall. But here you can actually keep both of these monsters on board. And again, we've already established one extra body on board makes a difference, can make all the difference, honestly. So we're going to go with Nervall here. We're going to banish 3 rather, and we're going to go for either Doom Eagle or Rugal. Doesn't really matter because you're going to turn that and Nervall into Apollousa. And then we're going to go and use the Nervall's Effect Engrave to search for our kit. And then from here, we're going to actually straight up go into Simorg. This is a nice thing about having the extra body is that previously you couldn't just go for this because you wouldn't have enough bodies on the board. And so you have to reroute a little bit. But this is slightly more efficient, which, you know, I'm all about efficiency. We're going to go ahead and actually banish 4 for Shurag. Now, you could do just a banish 2 for DDL and then turn this into Almirage, and that's fine too, but this is, again, an Oath line, so we're just going to demonstrate what you can do if you want to turn this into an Oath play as well. So yeah, we're going to go for Shurag instead, and again, you'll notice that the ability to open Fraktall allows you just more flexibility in what you banished, because one of these two will have to be banished in place of the Fraktall, which is fine. But yeah, it's just it changes the math again ever so slightly. So we're gonna send Oath off the kit, and then Shrag's gonna fetch us the Keras, and then we're gonna go for the Farigate to summon out the Keras from hand, and then from here we're gonna use the effect to banish 2 for the DDL, and then proceed to the end phase for the Barrier Statue. So with that extra step, we were able to turn on the Oath, which is nice, and we have the DDL protection for a Barrier Statue, which can get rid of either the Keras or the Farigate. And that's nice because that makes it so that if they like normal summon go battle phase, we don't have to relinquish resources from our hand in order to protect our Barrier Statue and like be still concerned with keeping Oath live because it's going to be live no matter what since we have 2 beasts in our field. And that is a nice benefit for sure. But yeah, this is something I thought I'd highlight in case you want to go about the route a bit differently. Definitely something to think about if you're building your extra deck in a different fashion than just going for the UDF. So rounding out the Warbler plus Fraktall lines is going to be a pretty interesting one that uses Harpy's Featherstorm as a defensive mechanism to actually counteract hand traps. And this is not the primary use for this card by any means currently, but that can maybe change depending on the future anatomy of decks as well as the concentration of hand traps running around. So I think that this is something to keep in mind just in case the format changes in that direction. But yeah, we're going to start things off with Fraktall, again, sending Wagtail. This is stuff you've seen a billion times already, so we're just going to speed this up a little bit. We're going to go ahead and go for the Recital. We're going to search for our Cobalt Sparrow. Again, if we're going to just showcase off the higher ceiling plays for this, we're going to go and summon out Sparrow after searching the Sapphire Swallow off Bird Call, and then we're going to use the Sparrow to search for our Nervall. And then right here, we did this last time, but I didn't mention it. This is summon number 5. So if you have Featherstorm, you can actually use it as a way to counteract Nibiru or just other hand traps, besides impermanence, obviously. But yeah, it's great just to have that extra insurance if you want to go out your combo this way. So that is something to think about if you are concerned about hand traps. Like maybe you don't want to play Cross-It Detonator, and this is like your replacement for it. This could be a reasonable surrogate. But yeah, we're going to go for Sapphire Swallow into Nervall. Because, of course, again, this is a winged beast, so it's fine. And then we're going to go and Nervall here, banishing 2, and then we're going to summon out the DDL this time. This is, again, just more alternate routes that we can go for. We're going to overlay for recital number 2, and then we're going to go and search for our Barrow Canary. This is not going to be necessarily the Apollousa line before, because we actually have a neat trick to still end on Utopic Draco Future, and we don't have to play 3 Recital Starling either. But yeah, we're going to search the Barrow Canary off the Recital, and then Nervall's going to grab us Kit. And from here, we're going to normal summon the Kit because we haven't normal summoned yet, and then we're going to banish 2 to go for the Farid. And now we're going to link these away, the Harpy Conductor and the Kit, into the Simorg. This allows us to trigger our Kit. Now, of course, once our Harpy Conductor leaves the board, we can't use it as hand trap insurance. So now you can just keep it and use it as part of your end board. You could just activate it if you wanted to, but your opponent could simply just chain Nibiru. So if they held it that long and you lost the gamble, that's kind of unfortunate. But again, everything has risks at some level, so that's the risk with this one. So just do keep that in mind. But yeah, we're going to send Rendezvous. You can also send Oath, actually. There's ways to make this work, and we'll kind of showcase that off here too. But yeah, we're going to send Rendezvous just for demonstration purposes. Now here we're going to use Barrow Canary in a pretty unexpected way. So obviously if we go for our Ensemble Robin, that's fine, but then we kind of just have this Recital Starling sitting there, not really doing much. And we want to get to Utopic Draco Future somehow. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to summon out Barrow Canary, and actually with this effect we're going to summon out the Recital Starling. And this line took me quite a while to figure out how to do. And also Dueling Book is annoying, and I ran out of spaces, so I had to use both extra monster zones. But we can actually use Wagtail to attach to the Recital Starling. And this is something I mentioned in the deck profile too, is that this is like an underrated utility aspect of this card, is that not only does it give you more bounces for your Ensemble Robin, but this can potentially be a mechanism of follow-up in case you go through your Recital Starlings. And this can come up like in the mid-game too, like if you go like for Farid, just special out Warbler from hand, and Warbler bring back this. You can use this to get more searches if you just are needing follow-up at any point. So I think this is definitely a useful trick to have up your sleeve. Barrow Canary plus Warbler can bring these back, and Wagtail can just get you more searches for free. Just note that you can't use this later in the turn, obviously, because it's once per turn. But that is something that is relevant for sure. So we're going to grab Nervall here. Could be any level 1, but this allows us more follow-up. Because as we'll see, after we go for the UDF, because now we have successfully put the 2 recitals back on our board, we haven't used Farid to special summon yet. So we're actually going to use her effect, and then by putting this under the Ensemble Robin right here, when we detach it, we get a Tri-Brigade follow-up too. So that is pretty nifty. And then the end phase, you know the deal, we're going to summon out the Barrier Statue. I guess I should mention that this could be any target for the Simorg. It could be, obviously, Mist Valley, Apex Avian, or Dark Simorg. But I'm using Barrier Statue repeatedly because I did not want to alter my build for variety. I altered it a little bit just to incorporate things like putting Harpy's Featherstorm in the deck and like Revolt and stuff to make those easier to demonstrate, but that is behind the scenes spoilers. But anyways, this is the board you end on right here. Oath is live, and that is pretty great if you want to go down that route, and you have protection for it too in the Ancient Warriors link. So lots of good stuff, and I think that's a cool way to use like Harpy's Featherstorm again as just like a protection mechanism right here. Okay, so moving on into part 5 of the video. You can see right here we have a hand that does not contain Turquoise Warbler, and even though she is one of the best enablers of the entire deck, it's pretty important to know how to combo when you don't open her, since of course that is never guaranteed. So this opening hand is going to contain Cobalt Sparrow plus Tri-Brigade Fraktall. A lot of these combos will work pretty similarly if you open Wagtail plus Fraktall, so keep that in mind. They are interchangeable in all of the combos in Chapter 5 except for one of them, which we'll specify when it comes up. But yeah, what we do is we're just going to pivot the Warbler Fraktall. It's pretty simple. Since it is the most flexible card, we can just fetch our Tri-Brigade engine instead and play that way. So pretty solid, and there's a lot of ways to make this work. So we'll go over the first one, and that is assuming that we just have no other cards to discard. Most of the other combos will be assuming that we have a Tri-Beast discard. It could be of any name. But yeah, we just want to make sure that we play this in sort of a more controlled environment. So we're going to Fraktall send Nervall at Kit right here, and then we're going to do a very conservative line here. This is just going to be simply Kit banishing 2 to summon out Farid instead of Harpy Conductor, and we're going to just use the Farid to summon out the Cobalt Sparrow. And then we're going to Cobalt Sparrow to grab follow-up for next turn. And then on summon number 4, we're just going to link everything into Simorg. It doesn't actually have to be 2 monsters, it's 2+, so we can just use all 3 of these and go into the Simorgh that way, because if we linked using the Sparrow plus the Farid into the Simorgh, and then we kit into Almirage, we play into Nibiru for no reason, so there's not really a point in doing that when we're playing pretty conservatively as is. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead, dump our Rendezvous, and be happy with our Simorgh Barrier Statue combo with just the Barrier Canary in hand. If you want to commit the Canary, you can. You can just end on a 2-mat Ensemble Robin, which is fine. But again, it doesn't add a whole ton to the board when you're already just ending on Barrier Statue. The redundancy of Ensemble Robin plus Barrier Statue is relevant in this kind of scenario, like when your board is relatively weak anyways, so you might as well just hold the follow-up. So I think that's pretty decent, and that is a very, very basic combo. The next logical step is to simply add a random Tri-Beast discard to this opening hand. And while there's a lot of Tri-Beast names that would simply straight up improve this combo to either one of the previous combos in this video or one of the later ones, this is just kind of to demonstrate if you open something like Crow, which is a great placeholder name for this example's sake. And this is one of several approaches you can do with Fraktall plus Sparrow plus random discard. Like I mentioned before, these are interchangeable with Wagtail except for this one specifically. So this is the combo in this entire chapter where you have to open Sparrow over Wagtail because you're going to be using this to actually search Nervall, which obviously Wagtail cannot get you to. Otherwise, the previous combo is fine because you're searching things like Barrier Canary off your Sparrow, and that can obviously be accessed if you just go for Barrier Call off the Wagtail. So that's all fine and dandy. But we're going to kick things off with the Fraktall. We're going to send Nervall to add Chaos this time. And we're going to immediately special summon out the Chaos by pitching our copy of the Crow, or whichever spare Tri-Beast it is in this case. And then we're going to banish True for our Farid. We're going to activate the effect. We're going to summon out the Cobalt Sparrow from hand. And then we're going to Sparrow to search Nervall. This is why it has to be Sparrow specifically, because Wagtail, again, does not access us this. And we're on summon number 3, so number 4 can simply be an Apollousa. And then we're going to normal summon the Nervall. We're going to go and banish 3 for our Simorgh, and then we're actually going to make ourselves a Linkuriboh because we were never able to put Kit into the graveyard, so there's no Rendezvous there. So that's kind of notable to note because if you were playing Almirage, this doesn't work nearly as well since, again, the biggest thing you have to worry about with Barrier Statue is the battle phase. So that's something to certainly consider in the end phase. We're, of course, going to get a Barrier Statue. Notably, as well, this is not in the extra monster zone, so it's not giving anything targeting protection, which is one of the biggest benefits of this card, actually. So you do want to keep that in mind as well. I think I mentioned in the comments here in the chat that it's probably just better to use the standard Fraktall play and then reserve whatever you want to follow up. Or you could just do the previous 5.1 combo, which is just commit the Cobalt Sparrow to search you to follow up, and you're good to go. You don't necessarily need to commit 2 extra cards or 1 extra card for Apollousa. You can simply just go Fraktall by itself or Fraktall plus one of these to get you a follow. Really is up to you. This is probably not one I would really recommend, but if you're a big fan of Apollousa, maybe like you want it like for the Drytron matchup or for the Virtual World matchup, you could consider this for sure. But yeah, just thought I would kind of mention this caveat while we're at it. Here is an alternative to the previous opening hand that I think is probably worth going for if you're going to commit all the way regardless. And this is somewhat Nibiru safe. Not completely, but you do have ways to sort of mitigate it. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go through. First up, we're going to go for our Fraktall, and we're actually going to deviate right away. We're going to send Kit, and we need the extra Tri-Beast engraved. That's why we're using it to send Nervall. And then Nervall is going to add Chaos. Now from here, we're going to pitch the spare Tri-Beast for Chaos, and that puts the 4th name engrave for our Shrike, which is what we're going to be going for. So we're going to go ahead and banish 4. You'll notice immediately that means that we can't use Kit to dump one of our protection spells or traps, but there's ways around this, which we'll get to in just a second here. So you're going to go for Shrike here and then link away for the Farid. That triggers a Shrike to add you either Celeste Wagtail or Cobalt Sparrow, whichever one you didn't open. So that's why, like I said, a lot of these combos, these two are simply interchangeable in the opening hand. 5.2 is the only exception in this entire chapter. So we're going to go ahead and Farid to bring out the Celeste Wagtail. We're going to go ahead and Wagtail search out Bird Call. And then here we kind of have to go for the greedy play. We don't have much of a choice. We're already playing pretty hard into certain hand traps, so you might as well just fully commit because this isn't like one of these super safe hands. So I think it's fine. We're going to go for the Cobalt Sparrow after we search Barrier Canary off of the Bird Call, and then we're going to search for Nervall off of this Cobalt Sparrow. We just need more Tri-Brigade names in circulation. So there's a couple of lines here. Because Cobalt Sparrow is summon number 5, it was Keras 1, Shrike 2, Farid 3, these 2, 4, 5. You have a couple of ways to go about this if they don't drop Nibiru on you. If they do drop Nibiru on you right here, we'll get to what happens in a bit. But depending on how risky you want to be, you can pivot in a couple of different directions. The first one is to be like, all right, I'm just going to make sure my opponent has no chance of Nibiru. If they're greeting it, then this can punish them. So we can go straight up into Apollousa. Then we can normal summon our Nervall, and then we can use its effect to banish 3 for the Simorgh. And then pretty similarly to the 5.2 combo, we can just go for Link Rebo, but we have the spare Barrel Canary, which is good. So we can now go for our Ensemble Robin. And then from here, we can Wagtail to give it another material, and then we can end phase, go for the Barrier Statue. So this is a little bit better because obviously we have more interruptions, so if we do lose out to the battle phase or like targeted removal, Apollousa plus the Ensemble Robin helps us substantially more, and Ensemble Robin is a follow-up, which was notably lacking in the previous setup. So I think that's important to note. This is one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is right here, which is going to be 5.4. You're at this stage right here, and your opponent hasn't dropped Nibiru on you, so you're going to be like, all right, we're just going to go all in, baby. So we're going to go for Recital Starling. We're going to use the effect Detaching for our Sapphire Swallow. Now, one thing to note is that you notice that I searched a Nervall off of this Cobalt Sparrow, and you might be tempted to be like, oh, cool, we can go for some nifty plays with like Turquoise Warbler. The reason why it's a bit risky, if you have like Sapphire plus Warbler here, it's great, right? Because you get an extra material and that's fine. But again, if you get Nibiru, your Warbler just is an extender that is contingent on you resolving your Sapphire Swallow, because you already went through Farigate, you already went through Bird Call, you'll have a monster in your field always at this point. So if like you get Nibiru, then your Warbler doesn't do much. I think I mentioned that in the notes here, but carrying on here, after you resolve your Recital for your Sapphire Swallow, you're going to summon her and the Nervall, and then you're going to overlay those two into the Recital. You're going to activate the Recital's effect, you're going to detach and grab your third copy of Nervall. So I mentioned, well, you've seen that all these combos required a spare discard. If that spare discard is Nervall, it changes the kind of sequencing of your combo pretty significantly for sure. So that's something you want to think about. It works to your benefit because you have the Nervall in your hand, so you can actually play a little bit differently, just kind of depending on how you structure things. But yeah, this combo specifically goes through all 3 Nervall. So yeah, there's one under the Recital here, and the third one's banished. So just be mindful of that. We're going to go for Draco Future, and then we're going to summon our Nervall because we haven't normaled yet. And then we're going to use the effect to actually go and banish 2 for our DDL. And then we're going to go for Simorgh because we have a Winged Beast now. And then we can go for our Barrel Canary into Ensemble Robin. And because we got the Sapphire Swallow into rotation, we're going to have a lot more materials under this one. And we have the added benefit of having the targeting protection as well. So this combo, in contrast to 5.3, trades the Apollousa for the targeting protection of Simorgh, and then you have DDL instead. So it's obviously much better in this case if you are able to go for this because the targeting protection is so significant, and you still have the Ancient Warriors Link monster to insulate you from the battle phase. Plus your Ensemble Robin is one more bounce, and that can again make the difference long term. Now, what happens if you get Nibiru'd here? Now, most of the hand trap insurance comments are at the end of the video, but I want to showcase this one off because this one is like a much more complicated, like, oh, what happens if you get Nibiru'd? And I was already showcasing off different scenarios, so that's why I structured it here. It was already hard as is to organize this video, so I apologize that this is maybe slightly out of order to some, but I think that this works fine in context of like this specific board state right here, where you have Farigate plus these 2 level 1s. So you get Nibiru'd here because it's summon number 5. They don't want to lose to Apollousa, so you get to summon out a token here. Now, if you had Warbler in hand, like I mentioned before, if you had Sapphire Warbler in that previous 5.4 combo, you can like Warbler bring back another monster, and that's just really, really nice. But if you get Nibiru and you have Canary Warbler, then that's really bad because Canary, again, does not beat Nibiru. Like, you can make Ensemble Robin, but it's never going to be big enough to contest Nibiru. So that is why it is nice to have the Nervall here because you haven't normal summoned yet. So you can actually make use out of this by going for a Banish 3, you go for Simorgh, you make the Link Rebo, which is vital, and then you go into your Ensemble play. And then from here, you go End Phase Barrier Statue, or Summon Barrier Statue. How many times have I done that in this video? That's like the 3rd time. But yeah, we're going to pass on this. So even if they have this Nibiru right here and they normal summon another monster that's bigger than the bear statue, your Link Kariba can protect at least one of these. So ideally, your other one should be enough to deter your opponent from comboing if you are in a combo matchup. Now, it's not ideal for sure, but this is a lot better than like if you search Warbler and you just instantly lose to Nibiru and you have nothing. So that's why I said at the beginning of 5.3, I was saying, this isn't the most insane way to play around Nibiru. It's not Nibiru proof by any means, but it does have a backup plan in case you do get stopped there. So that is pretty nice, and I think that's worth mentioning. Rounding out this chapter are going to be the Revolt lines, and there is in fact a distinction between opening Wagtail versus opening Sparrow with the Fraktall in your hand. And also, contrary to the combos that we saw a lot of the time in Chapter 3, you'll notice that opening Wagtail actually is conducive to a bit of a lower ceiling board than the Sparrow, so we'll kind of run through that as we go along here. So first off, we're obviously going to start off with the Fraktall, dumping the Nervall to add kit to hand, and then we're going to normal the kit, and then we're going to banish 2 for the Farid. You're noticing a pretty common theme here. Farid going to go and special out the Wagtail from our hand. That's going to grab us a search for the Bird Call. And then here we're going to hard mate the Bear Bloom, as is tradition in these Revolt focused hands. We're going to go ahead and send the Rendezvous off the kit, and then Bear Bloom's going to pitch 2. That's going to bring back the Nervall, and then Nervall can banish the 2 that we just linked away with, and that will go ahead and bring out the Harpy Conductor. Next up, we can overlay these for the Recital Starling. We're going to use the effect to grab ourselves a Turquoise Warbler. And then I make a note here in the chat, basically saying that you might be tempted to grab the Cobalt Sparrow, because that's what we did in previous iterations where we started off with like Warbler plus Celeste Wagtail. The issue that you run into is that actually if you try and do that, what happens is that you'll get the Sparrow on the board, you get your search, and you'll presumably have Sapphire Swallow plus whatever other monster. In this case, it would be Warbler since we didn't open her, so we want to get value, but you have to summon the Sapphire Swallow at that point, which makes it so that you don't have enough zones to actually make use of everything. You want to summon 4 monsters, but you have 3 zones. And additionally, you can't overlay into a Recital Starling before then, so you kind of have to use a Sapphire Swallow at that point, which makes it so that you're actually being a bit less efficient with your resource management. Whereas if you do it this way, searching out the Warbler first off the Recital and then going for the Sparrow afterwards, you do get to special out the Warbler from hand, and then Warbler is going to special out the Sparrow. Now, it feels a little bit bad to summon from your hand this way, but it does in fact clean up the board state a little bit, because you're able to go into Recital here, and then you can go for your Sparrow push afterwards. So that's quite nice. There's also a small reason why we're going for Harpy Conductor right here. You could go for the DDL, and that's totally fine. You can go DDL Apollousa, as we've seen in previous iterations of this combo, but this allows you to make UDF a little bit earlier, which is very, very marginal, because honestly, if you get Nibiru, you get Nibiru. At minimum, at least, you get the Revolt access, but this makes it so that you can keep some cards in hand at minimum if they choose to hold Nibiru for this point. So we're going to go ahead and grab any level 1 winged beast off the second Recital. It doesn't necessarily matter what it is. You can grab the Nervall if you want a Tri-Brigade follow-up, but that's not really necessary given that we're going for Revolt anyways. So I think that the Sparrow for targeting protection is just as fine, given that we're going to end on Ensemble Robin. So we're going to go for the UDF right here, and then we're going to go Sapphire Swallow since we still control Winged Beast. And then we can overlay into our Ensemble Robin, applying the effects of Sapphire Swallow as well as attaching with Celeste Wagtail. Then we can go for our 2-mat Apollousa, and we have, presumably, if we wanted to play the Rendezvous, we'd have that engraved as well. So just to reiterate, again, you're not necessarily playing everything in the same deck. You could if you wanted to. That's a deck building choice that you would have to consider there, but this is the potential board that you can end up on if you open the Wagtail with Fraktall. And then you can contrast this with opening Sparrow, which ends you on a bit of a slightly better board because you can save 1 resource. Remember, if you recall back to the point in the combo just now, where we had the Wagtail earlier, it made it so that the Warbler was a little bit more inefficient due to summoning from hand rather than from graveyard. But this actually bypasses that issue quite nicely, so we can actually save ourselves a resource. So we're going to start the combo pretty much identically to the last, where we're going to dump Nervall and add kit. We're going to kit to banish 2. We're going to go ahead and grab ourselves the Farid, which will summon out the Cobalt Sparrow, and that's going to net us a search for the Celeste Wagtail. And then from here, we're going to link into the Bear Bloom. this is all going to be the same essentially. So we're going to go and pitch 2 to grab back our Nervall that was banished. And then we're going to use those into a copy of the double Dragon Lords. We're just ending on a bit of a different board to show off some variety, although you've already seen this board previously, so I don't need to mention it too much. Recital is going to go ahead and add us a copy of Sapphire Swallow, and then we're going to go ahead and use the Swallow to go and summon out to the Celeste Wagtail. So here's why it's a bit more efficient, is that you can reserve your bird call for later, and this means that you can just clean up the board with the UDF first, and then you're good to go for your setup after that. So that's kind of the reasoning there. So we can grab our bird call. The second recital is going to fetch us the Turquoise Warbler since we haven't gone through her effect yet, and then we can go and make our UDF, followed by the bird call to grab us Barrow Canary. Again, this conflicts with the Bear Bloom, so not like we're going to use it this turn, but just in case we want to follow up for the next turn, that's pretty decent. We can go into Apollousa, and then we're going to go ahead and Bear Bloom to add Revolt, and then put back either the spare card or the Bear Canary, depending on what it is, and that is fine. So, as I say in the chat here, it improves the efficiency of the combo by a resource because we get to summon from the graveyard instead of from hand, which is nice. And also something that I haven't been mentioning every time we go for the Apollousa with this combo is that, of course, you can't really go for Apollousa to protect yourself around hand traps if you're using Berry Bloom as material, simply because, of course, you would be locking yourself into Tri-Brigade, so it's like you can't go for UFD or UDF afterwards. And that is a bit of an inconvenience, quite a large one at that, because it leaves you pretty vulnerable the entire time if you don't open, like, specifically, the Warbler plus one of the birds, which naturally Fraktall plus Sparrow or Fraktall plus Wagtail is weaker inherently, but this kind of demonstrates sort of the reason why that's the case. One final thing to note here is that you can still go for the board that we showed previously in the Wagtail iteration of this combo, that is sacrificing one Apollousa negation for the Ensemble Robin at the end, which is pretty good. It allows you to go ahead and kind of pick a bit more profitably between the card that you put back off the Bear Bloom. So you don't necessarily have to keep your search target from the Bird Call because your Ensemble Robin is also its own form of follow-up. Not to mention Stride can get you back into the Lyrilusc engine as well. So all these things are factors to consider, and it's the small things that count. So that is going to do it for the Fraktall openings. So the first 5 sections of this video really detailed what happens when you draw essentially the best hands of the deck. Granted, these are some of the more common combos, but they are also among the best. And you're not always going to draw the Turquoise Warbler, you're not always going to draw the Fraktall, so we also need a contingency for these less common hands. Now, fortunately, that doesn't mean that they necessarily have to be bad. Here we got 1-for-1, which is a really powerful one of, and while this doesn't get you to the full Symbolic setup that you want to be getting access to, it still by itself can get you quite far and end on a fairly respectable board. So we're going to go ahead and cover that right now. So we're going to go ahead and activate 1-for-1. This can pitch any monster in our deck, it doesn't matter what it is, and then we're going to summon out Cobalt Sparrow. And from here, we're going to trigger the Sparrow effect on summon to add ourselves a Wagtail from deck to hand. Now, since we're operating under the assumption that we have no other resources, we're going to have to normal summon her, but that's totally fine. This allows us to at least go for Recital Starling, so that can grab us a search. You want to specifically detach the Celeste Wagtail because you're going to be bringing her back right away with the Sparrow Canary that we're searching, since that is the effect that we have not used yet. So predictably, we're just going to go and Barrow Canary to bring this Celeste Wagtail right back, triggering its effect to add ourselves a copy of Bird Call. And then from here, we're going to go and overlay for Recital number 2. That's going to detach. Here it doesn't matter as much, but we want to add ourselves a Turquoise Warbler to hand. And then our Bird Call is going to fetch ourselves the Sapphire Swallow. Now here you could opt to summon out Turquoise Warbler via the effect of Bird Call. If you do, however lose out on actually at least 1 material and possibly 2 depending on how you do it for your Ensemble Robin. So if you summon out Barrow Canary, you're actually going to miss out on 2 materials since you don't get access to the Sapphire Swallow itself and then its additional effect to attach 1 more. If you go Warbler Special out Sparrow, then you're going to miss out on 1 material since you special from hand instead of from grave. So what you want to be doing instead, and this is why we're not making UDF just yet, is we're going to activate Sapphire Swallow while we still control winged beasts. That way we can summon itself and the Warbler and get the Barrow Canary from the graveyard. so we can maximize our Ensemble Robin bounces. Because keep in mind, we already normal summoned and we locked ourselves into Xyz pretty early, so we had no real way of making like a link tree but to protect this Ensemble Robin. So making it as big as possible is kind of the only way to go. So we're gonna go ahead and make UDF and then go and make the Ensemble Robin. We're gonna apply Swallow and then we're gonna go for the Wagtail. So this is a respectable 2700 attack point Robin, which is pretty decent. It's 5 bounces, and also plays around Triple Tactics talent due to the inability for this monster to change control, which is not too bad. Now here is going to be just kind of an extension of that, which is going to be 1-for-1 plus Nervall. There's a lot of ways you can kind of diverge from simply just opening 1-for-1, obviously because this is a 1 card in your 5 card opener. So the dynamic of your combo can change drastically based on the contents of your hand, obviously, but this is kind of just a sample showcase of what you can do with the addition of just a good card to discard. So pitching Nervall here this time, we're going to go same for the Cobalt Sparrow, and then we have 2 triggers here, so we're going to grab ourselves a search off the Nervall and off the Cobalt Sparrow as well. So off the Nervall, we want to grab Fraktall, and then off the Cobalt Sparrow, we're actually going to grab another copy of Nervall, which is pretty interesting because Fraktall, again, as we've seen time and time again, bridges us very well into the Lyrilusc engine, and so we want to make advantage of the fact that we'll get some bodies into the grave, which enables our Tri-Brigade Nervall to actually get us link fodder onto the board before we're Xyz locked via something like Barrow Canary, and we can still get more names into rotation at the same time, so we don't actually miss searching something like the Celeste Wagtail that we did previously in the last 1-for-1 combo. So that is quite nice. Fits a lot of the, checks a lot of the boxes quite nicely. We're going to send the Wagtail, and then we're going to go and use the Nervall after normal summoning it. That's going to allow us to banish our 2 Tri-Brigades in grave and go for the Farid. And then next up, we're going to overlay these 2 into the Recital Starling. This is not a combo that really plays around Nibiru, but this hand is not what I would consider necessarily strong by itself, so do keep that one in mind. We are going to grab Warbler here, however, because we can use the Farid to just simply summon it and get value. So that's precisely what we're going to do. We're going to summon out the Warbler and use the effect that's going to bring back the Celeste Wagtail that we sent, and then we can trigger that effect to add ourselves a copy of the Bird Call. And then here we can overlay into the Recital Starling number 2, and then we're going to go for the Sapphire Swallow. And then from here we're going to make our Utopic Draco Future, and we can also fire off this Bird Call as well, grabbing ourselves a Barrow Canary. And it's a bit awkward because we kind of ran out of Lyrilusc names to profitably use Sapphire Swallow, so we're actually going to summon out the Swallow directly here. This could theoretically be any Lyrilusc, it doesn't have to be Sapphire Swallow, but the reason I'm picking it is that you can bring it back off the Barrow Canary to give your Ensemble Robin more materials, which is always nice. But if you want to keep this in deck for maybe later extension, that is also fine. We're going to turn these into the Simorgh link, and then Barrow Canary is going to go and activate. That's going to bring back the Swallow that we just linked away with, and we can go for our Ensemble Robin. We can trigger the effects of the Sapphire Swallow, or the Ensemble Robin that is gaining the Sapphire Swallow's effect, as well as the Celeste Wagtail. And of course, in the end phase, we're going to get our Barrier Statue. Now, notably, there is no Rendezvous engraved, so it's a little unfortunate, but kind of similar to how we talked about mechanisms to beat Nibiru in the 5.5 combo. You'll notice that if they summon another monster, or if they summon a monster rather, they can only clear one of these. So as long as you have at least one threat remaining, not to mention that you have UDF to back everything up, you should be in a position to still deter your opponent enough to where if you survive with, say, maybe your defensive cards as well, then that could be good enough for you to win the game. So that's going to be it for 1-for-1. Again, it's not necessarily going to get you all the way there by itself, but it certainly is pretty solid as just a 1-card enabler. We have made it to Chapter 7, everybody, and these combos in this chapter are all going to involve specifically Barrow Canary, which is a super interesting card to think about in this deck because obviously the Xyz lock definitely hurts when you're not able to access Tri-Brigade names early, and that is going to be kind of the present theme for most of these combos, given the fact that you're going to have to use your Canary pretty early. But kind of continuing with the previous chapter, we want to explore combos where we don't open the Warbler, the Fraktall, and just the appropriate extenders to go along with them. So if you draw combinations like these, which you'll see often if you play, for example, pure Lyrilusc, this can definitely get you out of those situations where you might otherwise be scratching your head wondering exactly how to make this work. So these are all definitely playable. Not going to be the best combos in the deck necessarily, but they should get you the job done if you have the appropriate defensive like hand traps to supplement them. So we're going to begin with the Sparrow plus Sparrow Canary, which obviously is going to start us off with the normal summon of a Cobalt Sparrow. We can link her away into either Amirage or Linkuriboh. Either works here. Linkuriboh is nice if you want to protect your Ensemble Robin from battle, whereas Amirage helps you play around like Lightning Storm better. Really just depends on what you value more highly. We're going to go for the Barrow Canary, and then we're going to bring back the Sparrow. Also, something to note is that these combos may shape your opinion of which ones you want to go over, or which monster you want to include, being Linkuriboh versus Almirage, and there's strong arguments, I think, for both. So I've showed plenty of combos featuring either of these, and that's definitely something that you should consider when you're deck building. But off this Cobalt Sparrow, we're going to grab ourselves the Celeste Wagtail. Not really any point of grabbing Nervall here, because while we could go Sapphire summon out Nervall, we're already Xyz locked, so it doesn't do a whole ton for us when we, kind of just want to play with our Xyz engine as much as possible. So we're going to go for a Sidle Starling here. We're going to go and detach for our Sapphire. Getting access to Bird Call allows us to make use of Turquoise Warbler later, which is great. So that's what we're going to be aiming to do right now. We're going to activate the Swallow, summoning out itself and the Wagtail, which triggers that effect to grab ourselves Bird Call. And then we're going to overlay into the Sidle Starling. That's going to detach the Wagtail to add ourselves the Turquoise Warbler. And conveniently, we've already gone through Sapphire, so we don't have to worry about keeping Wing Beasts on the field. So even if we get Nibiru, we technically could still make Ensemble Robin. Again, it doesn't beat the Nibiru, but at least it remains an option. But we can go for the Topo Draco Future right here, and then we're going to go and grab ourselves a follow-up play for next turn, which is nice. And then we can special out the Turquoise Warbler. And then here we can bring back the Sapphire Swallow just to get more material under the Ensemble Robin, which we're making right now. And then we can go ahead and attach our appropriate materials. So this is a 4 bounce Ensemble Robin, 2k attack, protected by presumably Linkuriboh or Almirage, which is not too bad. And this is pretty similar to if you open something like Wagtail plus Canary. The concept is extremely similar. You just, again, work kind of backwards. I went for Almirage this time just to show off some variety. But of course, normal summon Wagtail, link off, bring it back off the Barrow Canary, search yourself the Bird Call. And then here we're going to go for the Recital Starling. That's going to grab ourselves the Cobalt Sparrow. Here you kind of do want to go for the greedy line, simply because if you don't, then you're not really going to have a great opportunity to actually get more bodies onto the field later. You're going to be one short of where you actually want to be since you already committed your normal summon. So here I would just go for the Cobalt Sparrow, and if our opponent has the out, then they have it. So here we're going to go for our Sapphire Swallow. We need to summon it right now, as well as our Turquoise Warbler. And then our Warbler effect can go and bring ourselves back the Wagtail, which is pretty decent. And then from here, we can overlay for our second Recital Starling. That's going to go and search ourselves a Barrow Canary. Again, pretty good follow-up for next turn. And then we can go for our UDF, as well as overlaying into the Ensemble Robin. And then we can go and attach an additional material with the Sapphire, as well as Celeste Wagtail attaching itself. So, ending on pretty much the exact same board with the same follow-up in hand, and that is not too bad. Now, what happens if we open Fraktall plus Canary? Now, this is interesting because, as we've already established before with like Warbler, this can simply replace whatever one that we prioritize. But the difference is that we can preserve our normal summons, so we can change the end board ever so slightly. So we can Fraktall here. I like sending Wagtail, but you can obviously choose to send Cobalt Sparrow. Doesn't matter a whole ton here. We're going to go ahead and Barrow Canary. We're going to go and search off of the Wagtail. Something to think about is that you could potentially go for Sparrow if you want to play around like targeting protection. That is pretty valuable to consider. So moving forward, that is something that is probably worth doing, to be honest. So we're going to go and deviate a little bit here. We're going to go for Turquoise Warbler, just because we have the option to. So it makes it so that we're not necessarily forced to go for our Cobalt Sparrow just yet, because we haven't gone through Sapphire yet either. So we can bring back one from grave, whichever that we'd attached, go for recital number 2, and that's going to add us our Sapphire Swallow. And then, this is maybe a point where you would possibly want to, again, go the reverse route so that you can use Swallow first and not have to keep the Wing Beast on board. But if you're getting Nibiru, you're getting Nibiru anyways, so it's not a huge loss right there. I mean, it is a huge loss, but the difference becomes minute. But here we can search Nervall, and because we haven't normal summoned, it can become an additional material for the Ensemble Robin, which is great. We're of course going to make our UDF, and then we're going to normal summon our Nervall, overlay everything into the Robin, and then we get the additional effects, of course. So we have a nice 5 bouncer, and we have Nervall under here as well. So that's going to be the follow-up that we have instead of the Barrow Canary that we had in hand. So even though this one is not really protected by a Link monster, it has an additional bounce and it makes it bigger, which is decent enough protection in a lot of cases. This is another example of a hand where I really want to stress just one point, and if there's anything that I can get across to you in this video, it's that Bird Call is not the same as the targeted searches. I cannot emphasize this enough. So what ends up happening, as we've seen in previous combos, is that Bird Call is oftentimes an extender that allows you to get an extra body, and that can contribute to either better end boards, more materials under Ensemble Robin, or just ways to make space on the board and trigger the effects that you need to. So this card is extremely important to manage, and when you open it, sometimes it can actually be a liability, which is very counterintuitive, but it definitely can mess up your combo strings. So this is going to be a perfect demonstration of why I think it's super important to just pay attention to how you're managing this. So we're going to start off with Bird Call, and we're going to grab ourselves a Cobalt Sparrow. Obviously, if we search Celeste Wagtail, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if we do the Celeste Wagtail line, then we're going to search a redundant card, and we just don't have a way to keep going after that. So far so good, this makes sense, right? We're just going to do the same combo as previously, right? This is the same, just standard 8.1 combo, or 7.1 combo. Sorry, I forgot what chapter we were on for a second. I'm going to go ahead and use the Canary, and then we can go for the Cobalt Sparrow. This seems fine. Nothing too out of the ordinary right here. We're going to grab ourselves the Sapphire Swallow, and we can just keep going. We're just going to overlay for Recital, and then we're going to go and grab ourselves the Celeste Wagtail. Seems pretty good. But hold on. Here you're in a weird position, right? Because if you search Wagtail here, you already used Bird Call, and like we mentioned at the beginning, that doesn't get us any extra value, so you're not really getting the extra body that you need to end an Ensemble Robin, because after you get to Bird Call, you overlay for Recital, but what can Recital search you that'll actually net you 2 Xyz materials for another rank 1? There actually isn't one, and that is kind of the conundrum of this. The other option is maybe to go for Warbler, because you haven't used that effect yet, but you'll still be missing a body, because what ends up happening is that you'll go Sapphire Swallow, summon out Warbler, bring back Barrow Canary, but then you overlay, and again, you already normal summoned and you use Barrow Canary, so there's nothing you can actually grab that profitably makes you a rank 1. So this actually is a line that only ends on like UFD, which is not great, but there's actually a way to kind of circumvent that. And again, I cannot stress enough, it's not the same as opening Cobalt Sparrow plus Barrow Canary. Cannot stress that enough. You could search for Nervall, which is something I mentioned at the end, but we can do a little bit better than this. So let's go ahead and just restart the simulation. And really, again, the point of this is to show that Bird Call is just such a unique card in how it functions. It really isn't just like a ROTA or like an E-emergency call. It really is its own kind of unique beast. So here what we're going to do is we're going to search the Cobalt Sparrow, but we're actually going to use a secondary effect to summon out Barrow Canary, which seems extremely weird. But this is the way that we actually get the extra body that we were missing, because we can make it up later with another Barrow Canary search. So we got a normal summon, and we're going to forego the Link monster instead to go for the Recital Starling. So here we're going to detach the Cobalt Sparrow since we haven't used it, and we're going to just grab another Barrow Canary. It seems very strange going through both of them turn 1, but these are kind of just the awkward hands you have to play out and think of in advance. So Barrow Canary can bring back these Cobalt Sparrow, and that can net us a search for the Sapphire Swallow. And now we are well on our way to actually getting the materials that we need to. So right here, we can grab ourselves a search for a Turquoise Warbler. We could also get Celeste Wagtail, since now we're not facing a shortage of Xyz materials, and that's totally fine. This just allows you to make your Ensemble Robin slightly bigger with one more material that the Warbler would grant you, but just kind of depends on if you prioritize follow-up or if you prioritize having the Sapphire Swallow and Turquoise Warbler to just have the 3 materials on board initially to end up with a huge Robin. Nervall also works, which is a reason that I kind of highlighted before. It kind of gives you Tri-Brigade follow-up as well. Here we can go for the Sapphire Swallow into Warbler into Cobalt Sparrow. And then we're going to go and overlay for the UDF, and then we can just simply make our Robin. Pretty nice and simple. So that's how we can turn kind of that wonky hand into a much better one. Obviously, we didn't have a Wagtail engraved to attach, but this is how you kind of can discern the key differences between when you open Bird Call and when you open the actual target. So this is something that I think is essential to kind of show off here. The last of the Canary combos is going to feature Turquoise Warbler, funnily enough. So I mentioned at the beginning of this chapter that, oh, you don't always open the Turquoise Warbler, and that's true, but Turquoise Warbler is contingent on having one of the Lyriluscs that synergizes with the best, being the Cobalt Sparrow or the Wagtail, and then by extension Fraktall works as well. But you can still make something work with Barrow Canary, or even Sapphire Swallow if you play 2 of it. I am not playing 2 of my current build, so that's why I chose the Barrow Canary, but truthfully, this works with pretty much any of the Lyriluscs that does not get an effect on special summon. So it includes another copy of itself, notably. So 2 Warblers also works here. So that's something to keep in mind. So we can start with Warbler that can go ahead and summon out the other Lyrilusc that doesn't get anything beneficial on summon, but that's fine. What we really want to just do is make Recital without normal summoning, and we're going to grab ourselves a Tri-Brigade Nervall. And this is a bit of a nice segue into some of the next chapters, mostly chapter 9, where we're going to discuss just how good Nervall is when you don't open Ideal. It really just fetches you into all of the engine that you could want. Here we're going to go ahead and normal summon the Nervall and then link off into Farid. We trigger the Nervall here to grab ourselves a Search for Fraktall. And then off the Farid, we're going to go ahead and summon the Fraktall, and this is going to be a pretty cool play here. So we're going to go and actually banish 4. This is going to allow us to go for a Strike, and then we're going to actually link away into a Simorgh, since Strike is a winged beast. And now we can go and trigger the Strike, and that's going to grab us another extender, and Barrow Canary happens to be a good one, because Fraktall can send itself actually from the field to activate its effect as well. So we can go ahead and dump the Celeste Wagtail, which finishes off our sequence pretty nicely. So we can go ahead and activate Barrow Canary. We are Xyzocked now, so that's something to pay attention to, but we can grab ourselves the Bird Call, which is great, and then we can go for Recital Starling again, and that's going to grab ourselves a Search for Cobalt Sparrow. Now, we have to be careful here. If we don't play 3 Recital Starling, then we have to be mindful of the fact that one of them is gone. So there's not really a good way to make Utopic Draco feature in this hand. Instead, we're just going to simply go grab ourselves a Cobalt Sparrow off the Recital, activate Bird Call to act the Sapphire Swallow, and from here we can actually trigger the Cobalt Sparrow since we haven't done that yet either. And that can get ourselves a copy of Nervall, which is pretty decent follow-up here. And then we can go and summon out these 2 via the effect of the Sapphire. And then we can overlay for the Ensemble Robin. And then we can attach the Celeste Wagtail in the graveyard, and then end on the Barrier Statue. Also, on summon, you can choose to boost the Simorgh attack by 600 with the Recital. I just forgot to do that in this simulation. And here you go. Now, we don't have the Rendezvous engrave again, but it's kind of similar to before when we mentioned that if they normal summon a monster, they can beat over 1 but not both of these. So you should have a deterrent left on the board that can prevent your opponent from fully popping off, and that is generally fine, especially given how suboptimal this hand was. So that's going to kind of do it for the Barrow Canary plays, and next we're going to go into even wonkier hands. Alright, so now we're really digging into the extremely jank territory in terms of the viability of these hands. So these are some of the hands that definitely are workable, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops and hurdles to make a decent board out of them. So the first one that I'll be discussing here is Bird Call plus Wagtail. Now, quickly after I started testing this deck, I realized that this is one of the worst combinations of cards to draw, because your Wagtail doesn't actually get you any value as soon as you activate Bird Call, which we've established a lot of times in the past. Like, we were never really searching Wagtail off of this card ever. If given the option, like I mentioned, if you open, for example, Warbler plus Bird Call, you're always searching Cobalt Sparrow instead. So what happens when you open these 2 cards and you have nothing else to help facilitate them? Well, there is a way to make it work. Where there's a will, there's a way. We're going to Bird Call and search ourselves a copy of Cobalt Sparrow, actually. And then we're going to summon out the Wagtail via the effect. Now, you could go for something like Turquoise Warbler just to get like a free body without having to commit your normal summon, and that's fine. You can simply go the route where you search Nervall and then link 2 into Farid and then do all those shenanigans. That's totally fine, but I wanted to kind of showcase a different route that you can take with this hand in particular. So we can search a follow-up Bird Call, that's decent for next turn at minimum, and then we can just go and normal summon our Cobalt Sparrow and go for a Recital Starling play. Now this of course is predictably going to be kind of like a Barrow Canary line, where we're just going to lock ourselves into Xyz this turn and just kind of do that. If you want to go for the search Fraktall off the Nervall, banish 4, go into the Simorgh, and then search Barrow Canary afterwards and send the Fraktall from field play, that is definitely viable, and that's what we discussed in a previous combo, which is, not too bad. But if you want to kind of try an alternative version, this is a way to go. So we can Barrow Canary to bring back the Cobalt Sparrow here. We can use that effect to add ourselves a Turquoise Warbler because we haven't accessed either this card or the Sapphire Swallow yet, which is what we're going to be doing right now. So we're going to grab ourselves the Sapphire Swallow, and then from here we can go ahead and activate it. We can bring both it and the Warbler onto the field, and Warbler can revive our Sparrow in our graveyard, and that sets us up pretty nicely for the Utopia Draco Future plus Ensemble Robin board. Again, this ranks fairly low on the list of end boards that I would like to make, because at this point we are basically just playing pure Lyrilusc, and I think that deck does a better job of consistently pumping out these fields, but I think nonetheless this is still a fairly respectable board to end on and is not too shabby overall. Now here we got a very, very strange hand, because like I keep mentioning, Sapphire Swallow is never really the one you want to be leading with, because it's always accessible if you're able to resolve your combo anyways, and this is kind of the reason why. Sometimes you just open hands where she's either completely dead in, or you get hands like this. This is more on the fortunate side of things, because at least it makes it so that our Sapphire is playable. Now I will mention in the next chapter there's a lot of ways to make a Nervall plus any Tri-Beast hand work, so you can kind of ignore the Sapphire Swallow in this specific hand, but I want to focus on the Sapphire Swallow in particular with this case, so we're going to be using it. So we're going to start things off with normal summoning Nervall. Nervall is really the saving grace of this hand. You would really just need this to be a Nervall, or this to be like a Cobalt Sparrow or Celeste Wagtail, so you can like normal the Crow and get value there. But either way, as long as you have one of those, then it makes drawing Sapphire Swallow not too bad. So we're going to go ahead and activate Sapphire Swallow, summoning 2 more bodies to the field, and then we can go for Recital Starling. Then we can search for a Cobalt Sparrow as well as a copy of Fraktall. You could go for the Barrow Canary here and then do the play where we pitch Fraktall to send our target that we can revive off Barrow Canary, but we can go for a bit of a different play because we have this extra body on the field. So prior to that, we can go ahead and just send our kit and then send our Rendezvous, because we actually do want to end on the Barrier Statue with this combo. And we can just simply go into Farid, which is pretty straightforward. So we can go search our Barrow Canary and then go for our copy of Simorgh. We are already playing into Nibiru because we had 3 bodies on the field, then Recital, and then Farid was 5, and this is way beyond 5. So we might as well use our Barrow Canary while we have the chance to and end on a bigger board. And so we can end on a 3-mat Ensemble Robin, and then we can go to the end phase and activate the Simorgh for the Barrier Statue. It's not the greatest play, but it is, pretty decent. It's like the standard turn 1 Fraktall play if you open that, plus just a little bit more. So I think for all things considered, sometimes if you draw the Sapphire Swallow with enough Wing Beasts, it can get you there. So more of the story is, if you want to focus more heavily on this card, you should play probably a critical mass of Winged Beasts, and that sort of directs you in the direction of just pure Lyrilusc. But for what it's worth, I think this is also pretty strong in terms of what we accomplished with the resources we had. So the last series of combos that we're going to touch on in this video are going to be involving Tri-Brigade Nervall, at least before we get into how we play around hand traps. But Nervall is pretty interesting because it performs a fairly similar function to Fraktall in the deck, in that it bridges together both the Tri-Brigade and the Lyrilusc halves quite nicely. However, unlike Fraktall, this card is typically not going to be your starter a lot of the time, since you want to normally be, of course, accessing it via the myriad of searches that you're performing via Recital Starling and the Cobalt Sparrow, and then that kind of just feeds into the rest of your Tri-Brigade package. However, in situations like this, where you draw something like a Nervall plus a Tri-Beast discard, you will have to pivot the role of this card into becoming a starter. And this is going to be, of course, the weakest example by far, but it still is somewhat manageable. So we're going to simply start off with a normal summon of a Nervall, and we're going to go into either Almirage or Linkuriboh. You're going to typically want to go for Almirage if you play it, because we need to vacate our extra monster zone, which you'll see in a bit. Nervall is simply going to grab ourselves Kairos, and then we're going to pitch the Tri-Beast name for the Kairos, and then we're going to banish 2. And if we have Almirage, we can just chain it to protect our Kairos, but more importantly, make sure our extra monster zone is clear so we can go for Harping Conductor into the Simorg link, and then we're going to end on the Winged Beast of choice. Now, if we go for Barrier Statue specifically, this is quite weak because we do not have Rendezvous Engrave, and this is not the strongest combo by any means, and that is why just having any Tri-Beast discard is not the greatest. But if we change the equation a little bit and move this into a Nervall plus, say, a Barrow Canary, then things can become a bit stronger. So we're going to start the same way. We're going to normal summon Nervall, and then go into, this time, a Link Revo, again, just for the sake of variety. But this time our Nervall search is going to fetch us a copy of Fraktall, and you will notice that this ends up becoming quite similar to Barrow Canary plus Fraktall in general, except now we exchanged our normal summon and subsequently an extra material under Ensemble Robin for a Link Revo to protect it, which is fine. So from here on out, this combo is essentially going to be the same. And if you're familiar with the Chapter 7 combos by now, you should be able to tell where this is going. So we're going to go from Barrow Canary into the Celeste Wagtail to grab ourselves Bird Call. We're going to access the Recital Starling, and that's going to get us a search for Cobalt Sparrow. And then we're going to activate Bird Call next to get Sapphire Swallow, and using the secondary effect to summon out Cobalt Sparrow. And then that's going to grab us another search for the Turquoise Warbler. Then we can just simply trigger the Sapphire Swallow, summoning itself and the Turquoise Warbler to the field. And then we're going to bring back the Wagtail. I make a minor mistake here, and I use the raw materials to overlay. You want to be overlaying specifically the Warbler plus the Wagtail for the second copy of Recital Starling, because you want to be protecting your Ensemble Robin from targeting protection. So you want to keep the Sparrow on the field. But that's just a minor thing that I made a mistake on in producing this this replay here. But not a big deal. We can grab another search just as follow-up, and then we can go into Utopic Draco Future, and then we're just going to overlay for our Ensemble Robin. Pretty straightforward. Again, very reminiscent of the combos that we've already done in Chapter 7, so there's not a whole lot to dissect here, and I already mentioned that in chat as well, that the materials could be a little bit more optimized, but these are just things to think about in-game as well. This Nervall can just be any follow-up tool. It could be Barrow Canary, or even DD Crow if you want more ways out your opponent's resources. If you, for example, are fearing like a droplet into full Drytron combo, that might be something you want to consider. And then we can move on into another iteration of this, which involves Turquoise Warbler plus Nervall. And this is one of the interesting combos because I didn't include this in the Warbler section because this is a little bit more tricky to actually enable. Because there's a couple of different ways you can actually do this combo. So I'll go through both the options right here. So first up, we're going to just special out our Warbler, and then we're going to normal summon Nervall. And this is going to be the Exceased focus line first. So we're going to overlay for the Recital Starling, and then use the effect to grab ourselves Barrow Canary. And predictably, we're going to add Fraktall off the Nervall. And this is something that we've seen as a recurring trend, but abusing this interaction between Barrow Canary and Fraktall is nice when you open in not the best case scenario of hands. So we can simply just send our Fraktall to the graveyard to send our Wagtail, and we are now off to the races. We can activate Barrow Canary's effect to summon back Wagtail, trigger the effect for Bird Call, and then it is essentially the same series of combos from here, going into our second recital, adding our Cobalt Sparrow, and then we can access the Utopic Draco feature. Bird Call can add a Sapphire Swallow, and then we can summon out the Cobalt Sparrow. And then we can actually go for another copy of Turquoise Warbler, since we didn't actually use her effect on summon. We just simply specialed her and then normaled the Nervall. So that is quite nice. We can get free extra value right there. And notably in chat, as I mentioned, you can add Nervall to special off these Sapphire Swallow right here in case you want to have more follow-up underneath the Ensemble Robin as well. That is totally fine. And then we're just going to bring back the Barrow Canary off the Warbler, and then we're going to go for a 6-mat Ensemble Robin. So this is, I think, the biggest Ensemble Robin of the entire video, which is quite notable. It's 3200 attack as well. So that is quite formidable for sure. It requires less battle protection since it is already so huge to begin with. The other way you can do this combo is just to flex more into the Tri-Brigade route. So you gotta start things the same way into Special Summon Warbler, Normal Summon Nervall, but we're gonna deviate right away and go into Farid. And then Nervall is gonna search as a Tri-Brigade name, so we're gonna add Kip. So we can't really do the play where we add Fraktall and then banish 4 to go into Shirai and then send Fraktall from field because we just don't have enough names. If we overlaid for a Recital, then it doesn't really do a whole ton other than the previous iteration, which was Exceeds focused because we normal summoned, right? Whereas in other case scenarios, you could just reserve your normal summon for the Nervall and then go into Fraktall, or sorry, Farid afterwards, and that's fine. But we don't have that option available to us, but it's not a big deal. We can simply go from Farid into Kip. Then we can banish 2 for the Heartbeat Conductor, and then we can end on a nice and simple Simorgh. We can't use this kit for Almirage since she was not normal summoned. Keep that in mind. This also does still play into Nibiru, so that is also something to pay attention to. But we end at least on Rendezvous Engrave, which is better than the Nervall plus random Tri-Beast discard, and that is pretty noteworthy. So, despite the fact that opening Nervall is not necessarily the greatest opening, you can still make things work depending on what other enablers you have with it. And I think that it's quite flexible given the fact that it works with a lot of the, a fair amount of the Lyrilusc names, as well as of course the Tri-Brigade names as well. Alrighty, at long last, we have finally reached the last chapter of the video, and that is going to be involving how we can play around specific hand traps using the sample bread and butter hand of Warbler plus Sparrow. Now, a lot of hands can play around specific hand traps, but I like this combination the most because of the fact that, you know, these are pretty resilient cards in general, with Cobalt Sparrow's targeting protection on the Xyz monsters, as well as the fact that you don't have to search anything out prior. So it makes things a little bit easier in terms of just raw opening these cards. You can adapt and make things work, of course, which you naturally have to, and it's possible to cover every single hand trap and every single choke point in every single hand combination. I wish I had the ability to do that, but even I am not that insane. But regardless, let's go ahead and get started here. So the first scenario is going to be against Ash. We're going to cover Ash, and followed by Imperm or Valor, followed by Joel, and then Nibiru. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and start off with a Turquoise Warbler. Her effect is going to go ahead and special out the Cobalt Sparrow from hand, and then that effect will be ashed right here. So they can either ash the Cobalt directly or the first Recital Starling, it doesn't matter. Harkening back to the very beginning of Chapter 2, I mentioned that you want to be searching Nervall first because it does more independently by itself, and this is the reason why. So in either case, you're going to be only getting 1 out of your 2 searches, and that search is going to be Nervall specifically. If you search Sapphire Swallow, then you are going to be kind of out of luck because that card doesn't really do a whole ton in this kind of scenario. But if you searched out Nervall, you can just normal summon it and then make a Link 2 play into Farigit. And this is pretty reminiscent of 2 different combos that we already touched on. And as I note in chat right here, you either can do the play that we just did at the end of last chapter, which is the Nervall plus Warbler line, where we simply search Kit, go and end on the Simorgh plus Barrier Statue with Rendezvous Engrave and call it a day. Or we can go for kind of the higher ceiling play, which we discussed all the way back in Chapter 7, where we go Canary plus Warbler into Nervall, and then we search our Fraktall because we have enough materials engraved due to overlaying for Recital, and now Fraktall has enough materials to go for Shrike, and then we can search for you know, another Barrel Canary off that, and then use the Fraktall on field to send the material that we want to get value off of. This is slightly different because we already attempted to activate Cobalt Sparrow, so that's going to be what I'm demonstrating here. But if you choose to go for the simpler, safer approach with the kit, then it's going to be exactly the same from here. So you can make your decisions accordingly. But yeah, let's assume that we get Fraktall just for the sake of example. And I want to just demonstrate again how having already used Sparrow changes the dynamic of the combo a bit slightly. So we're going to go ahead, activate Fraktall, banish 4. That's going to bring out Shrike. And then we can link these off for a Simorgh link. And then we're going to use Shrike to add a copy of the Barrel Canary. And then on field, we can use the Fraktall to send itself to dump a copy of Wagtail. And then we're going to follow up, of course, with the Barrel Canary. We're going to Xyz lock ourselves and then search a Bird Call off the Wagtail. And we can overlay for Recital Starling number 2, detaching Wagtail to grab ourselves Nervall. Again, make sure you detach Wagtail so we can reattach it under the Ensemble Robin later. We can Bird Call here, and then we can get ourselves Sapphire Swallow. This Nervall off the Recital, by the way, could be whichever you know, level 1 winged beast that you want to summon with Sapphire Swallow. You don't have to make it be Cobalt Sparrow because you're going to put it underneath the Simorgh link anyways to give it targeting protection. So that's totally fine. But yeah, from here, we're just going to simply activate Sapphire Swallow, summon out both, and then go for the Ensemble Robin. And then we get to activate the Celeste Wagtail. Technically, it actually didn't matter if you detached Wagtail, I guess, because you simply were able to attach the Barrel Canary using Sapphire Swallow's effect anyways, but it's nice to just constantly have this in the graveyard just to keep reattaching it, just in case. So yeah, this is going to be a 3 material Ensemble Robin with the Barrier Statue. Again, no Rendezvous Engrave with this specific combo, but in most cases, your opponent won't be able to beat over both of these in battle phase, so you'll still have some line of defense. So that's how we can play around Ash, and you'll notice that ashing on Bird Call is not really as much of a factor here, because if they are gonna try and hold it for Bird Call, in this case, we're gonna make UDF prior to that, so we can either negate it, or we're in a pretty good spot because a lot of the time we don't need the Bird Call to resolve if we start off with the Warbler plus Cobalt Sparrow. So that's something to note. If they are trying to hold Ash for this card specifically, you can kind of punish them if we didn't have to open with it, which is nice. Next up is going to be playing around Veiler or Imperm. So you can see your opponent possibly stopping your Cobalt Sparrow search, and that's fine. That's basically the same as ashing it, right? So you just do the same as the previous scenario. But I think the better time to Veiler in this kind of hand is definitely on the Turquoise Warbler itself. Because what ends up happening is that you have to now commit your normal summon to a Cobalt Sparrow, which is not ever really what you want to do, is use a normal summon on a Lyrilusc in this build, because those are typically going to be reserved for the Tri-Brigades. Nevertheless, though, we can still make something work, and this is going to just simply be an Xyz focus line where we go for the Barrow Canary off at first Recital Starling, and that is okay. And we never actually got to trigger the Cobalt Sparrow since we normal summoned it, so we can just proceed with our a lot of our Chapter 7 plays right here. So Barrow Canary into Cobalt Sparrow, that's going to grab our search for Wagtail, and then we can overlay for Recital number 2, we can get our Sapphire Swallow, and then from here we can activate Swallow to summon out itself and Wagtail, triggering the Wagtail for the Bird Call. Then we can overlay for the Draco Future, and then we can overlay here for the Ensemble Robin, and then we can go ahead and attach materials. We don't have to use this Bird Call because there's not really anything that can, we can profit off of it realistically. Mostly due to the fact that we already normal summoned, we already went through Barrow Canary, and we don't have an extra name to summon off the Bird Call anyways, so it's totally fine. And yeah, right here in the chat, the last thing I note in this particular example is that there's obviously distinctions between opening Warbler plus Wagtail versus Warbler plus Sparrow. You get to actually make use out of your Bird Call extra body, which makes your Ensemble Robin a little bit bigger, and that is quite nice. Of course, this is all assuming that you're getting hand trapped in the same spot at the cost of potential follow-up. Everything is pretty much a trade-off here, so do keep that in mind. The third iteration of this, or third exercise of this, rather, is going to be against Droll, and this is a very debilitating hand trap for sure, but we can still make stuff work. It's just extremely tricky. Notably, if you open up like Bird Call, then this is a lot worse because now you're kind of already expending a search and you're getting Drolled right away, which is unfortunate. But let's assume that you just hard open these two names, which is great. So we're going to resolve our Cobalt Sparrow, and we're going to get Drolled immediately, which is not great, but we can still make something work right here. So this is also an option you can do if you get ashed, by the way, and you can actually extend a little bit because you can still get your Nervall search, which isn't horrible. But yeah, you can have the option to go into Farragut, and then you can Farragut to special summon out Nervall, and then Nervall can banish 2 to summon out the Double Dragon Alerts, and then you can go for the Simorg Link, and then you're obviously locked up by Droll, so you can't search here. But at minimum, you get the Barrier Statue protected by the Ancient Warriors Link monster, which is pretty fine considering the fact that you got Drolled, and this deck, if you haven't noticed, searches a lot. So that's totally okay, all things considered. And then the final thing is up against Nibiru. So if you watched my video versus Dragon Link, then you already kind of know where this is going. But pretty much all versions of Warbler plus Sparrow or Fraktall or Wagtail can play around Nibiru essentially in the same way. And I also discussed ways you can play around Nibiru if you open up Fraktall plus either Sparrow or Wagtail. So a lot of hands can play around just Nibiru. So if you're playing against this deck, just kind of as a note, Nibiru by itself often is not enough to stop this deck. So just do keep that in mind. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and special out Warbler. We're going to go for Cobalt Sparrow. And then we're going to add ourselves Nervall, of course. Then we're going to go for summon number 3. This is Recital. And then we're going to grab ourselves a search for Sapphire Swallow and Nervall. And then here, these are going to be summons 4 and 5. So your opponent will probably drop Nibiru right here. If they wait for you to go into the second Recital and then go into Utopic Future and then drop it before you go into Utopic Draco Future, then that's a lot better for you because you get one more search. But we're assuming your opponent is trying to cut you off with the most Tri-Beasts engrave and Nibiru you before you get any value off the second Recital. You could or they could wait for you to just overlay into the second Recital before you use the effect and then just drop it there. which is kind of debatable. It just depends on if you as the opponent value giving them an extra Tri-Beast engrave at the cost of them going through both recitals turn 1. I think either option is valid, but they result in essentially the same resource pool, so it's fine, at least for the sake of this example. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get Nibiru, which is fine. We get to trigger the Nervall here, so we're going to add ourselves Kip. And then from here, we're going to Kit, and then we're going to banish 4 since we have enough spare resources. And then we're going to go for our Shrike. And then Shrike is able to out the Nibiru, which is great. And then we're going to link into the Farid, and then we can trigger both the Kit and the Shrike. That's going to go and send Rendezvous, and then we can add Celeste Wagtail. Again, if you open up Wagtail, it's a little bit different. You can just simply reverse the order of this, and that is fine. If you open Bird Call, it changes the math a little bit as well. It makes it so that you aren't able to search Barrow Canary unless you have like a spare Winged Beast, for example. So you can't end on the Ensemble Robin in that case, and I'm pretty sure I covered that. If not, that is something that is worth knowing for sure. But Farid can summon out to this copy of Wagtail, and then we can search for Bird Call. And again, this is yet another example of how opening Bird Call, okay, yeah, I do note it in the chat right here, but yeah, opening Bird Call is not the same as opening the name. Again, I cannot stress that enough. But yes, we can go ahead and go for our Simorg link, and then go for a Bird Call. If we hadn't already had to use it, then we can search Barrow Canary, and then we are in a good spot because we can end on both Ensemble Robin as well as our Barrier Statue in the end phase, and we have Rendezvous engraved to go. And this Nibiru is off the field because it was banished with the Shurag. So this is how you can profitably play around Nibiru quite well. And this is especially helpful if you're playing stuff like Apex Avion, because now you're in a pretty good spot against like a lot of different matchups. But again, the choice of target is always up to you. So that is going to conclude this extremely long video. I have not begun to edit this yet, of course, but I anticipate this is going to be a very, very, very long video. If you did watch all the way through, I am astounded because this required very many different recording sessions, and I don't know how much footage I will have to sift through to find the best takes. So that is going to take a while in and of itself. But regardless, thank you so much for watching. This really was a lot of fun to do, even though it was also kind of painful at the same time. But no, I really do enjoy doing this. It's cool to kind of look at the small optimizations and the minute differences and share those all with you guys who are interested. And even if not, hopefully you took away something from this video. I sure hope so, because otherwise I have failed in my ability to communicate effectively. But anyways, yeah, if you want to see more content like this, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. It means a lot. If you found this video helpful or think that this will be helpful to a friend, please share it as well. Would really be awesome if we could get this video out there. And if you want to see more combo videos or more like guides in general for like different decks, feel free to leave suggestions for that. I'm always open. If you want to see me play this deck against certain matchups, then I could do that as well. Like, always leave suggestions for content. I am willing to listen, of course. I tend to be pretty good at reading through most of the comments. But yeah, we're gonna wrap things up right here because I need to start editing. So thanks guys for watching again, and I will catch you in the next video. See you guys.